You're watching CHCO-TV's gavel-to-gavel coverage of the November 15, 2023 Special Committee of the Whole meeting for the Municipal District of St. Stephen. I'm Florence Mitchell. In today's meeting, committee will discuss the 2024 municipal budget. Now let's join committee in the Moosehead Room at the Garceland Civic Center in St. Stephen.
All right, welcome everyone to the Municipal District of St. Stephen Special Committee of the Whole meeting agenda. First off, to call to order. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered today on the ancestral unceded territory of the Passamaquoddy people. And then before we get going, I'd like to have approval of the agenda. Mover and seconder, please.
Move. Second.
Deputy Mayor Wheaton, Councilor Wright, that the agenda for the Special Committee of the Whole meeting November 15th, 2023 be approved. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Seeing none. Motion approved. We're really light here tonight, folks. I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, here comes another councilor. Any conflicts of interest this evening? So far, none. All right, no public evaluations. Next up, mover seconder to move into discussions on the 2024 municipal budget. Councilor Eastman. Councilor Greenlaw. Don't have to vote on that, I don't believe. So let's jump right in. Right.
Thank you, Your Worship. So with your leave, I'm going to recommend that committee start with the utility operating fund budget. You would have got that by email or in your iPads earlier today. It's also was on your desk when you came in case you need a hard copy. We're going to start here because I think it's going to be the easiest one, and we'll take a journey through it a little bit here. So this is the summary of the overall budget for the operation of the utility. As you can see, it balances. This budget presumes no rate increases for 2024 in the utility. It has a small contribution to reserve in the order of just over $15,000, but which we know from consultant reports and everything isn't enough to be going into reserves. But it does propose to hold the line on rates, and if it's the decision of ultimately of council to look for some additional revenue for reserve transactions to build for capital infrastructure down the road, that would have to be through a rate increase. There's no other tools available to us really inside the utility budget other than the rates, because the utility must be self-financing by law, right? So we can't take tax money and transfer it over. So everything has to be self-financing. So there's the summary. I'll just go through real quickly. So where the revenue comes from, obviously we have water and sewer that we charge rates for. So those numbers, 2023 is on the left column, 2024 is on the right. You'll see a small decline in the water. It's industrial has consistently been dropping over the last number of years as far as how much they consume. Part of that has to do with lines that aren't running at a major industrial plant in the area, and they've been cutting down the water they use for cooling and things like that. So it's been a challenge every year over the last number of years to deal with the revenue loss. But on the other side, on the conservation and environmental side, it's probably a good thing they're using less water. So it's kind of a double-sided coin. And the same thing on the sewer. Sewer is a ratio factor off the water consumed by any consumer. So they tend to move in cohesion with each other. I don't think we have too much else, unless there's questions to go through there. But
I just have one question. In the water industrial, we see a decrease in the usage of 2014, but in the sewer it goes up if it's a percentage of the water used.
It's not with industrial. It doesn't necessarily work that way. I'm sorry. With the industrial, not all of our agreements work that way. It does with the on the residential side, but on the industrial side, we have some agreements that are strictly sewer. So it doesn't necessarily follow that you're going to pay 1.5 times on the sewer rate.
So we're holding the rate, so we don't have any excess money to put into reserves. I'm just thinking about the Gemtech report. They talked about the infrastructure and about the need to cover that. Are we okay for another year?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about the Gemtech report and its recommendations, and administration is in agreement with the recommendations that were there. Due to some ongoing things in the utility, our proposal is that we delay that 1 year to allow us to wrap our heads around the system as it currently is operating a little bit more. Our investigations have led to more questions than answers at this point. And so a 1 year reprieve before starting those types of swings. As committee will also recall, at one point we discussed the municipal usage of water and metering that for a period of time to get a good sense for a following budget. Still our intention to do that, so it kind of meshes up with that as well as far as having that extra data to coincide, because we know the Gemtech report commented on a fair bit of volume of water that was not generating revenue. And it'd be interesting to see how much proportion of that is actually being used by municipal infrastructure at this point. So it's nice, outside of the challenges we're currently trying to deal with, there's a timing thing that works really well as far as delaying 1 year to have that extra data be brought into the overall analysis.
Thank you. But that's not to say that we couldn't consider increasing that very, very modest amount that's going into the reserves without getting into the details of the Gemtech report, or specifically addressing the recommendations in it, other than that one aspect?
Absolutely. So the budget that's being presented, the draft budget that's being presented right now, like I said, only presumes $15,000 going into the general capital reserve. In reality, that doesn't buy us a pump. That doesn't buy us pretty much anything that would be useful to us if we did have something go down. So if there was a willingness amongst council and they deemed it was in the best interest of the operation of the utility that a slight increase be done to the rates and that the revenue generated from that be directed solely into the reserves, you could do that. We would look for a direction from committee as to what that rate change might look like, whether that's a percentage or whatnot, so that when we redraft for adoption, that we can include it, we can put the reserve transaction in there for you, and we'll know how much money we're generating. Especially, I mean, we know the timelines on budget are, well, tight would be a understatement at this point, because they're due today. We're not expecting an approved budget today on either budget, to be perfectly clear, because you're sitting as committee and you don't have that power. So we are going to be asking for a special meeting hopefully next week, once we have some direction from you of the last changes for balancing each of these budgets. So whether it's now or at the end of going through the budget, it would be an appropriate time for committee to discuss that type of strategy for sure.
Go ahead, Councilor Wright, or Councilor Greenlaw.
I just wonder how we're doing with the unpaid amounts from previously. Would that make this a little bit less, obviously the utility solvent, right? But I'm just wondering, those unpaid amounts, would that soften this a little bit?
Unfortunately not, because we do record it as revenue even when it doesn't get paid, because we do expect to get paid. So it doesn't, an enhanced collection service isn't going to fix isn't going to generate additional revenue that can go into the reserves. It'll just move it on the balance sheets.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we discussed this a little bit before the meeting, and I to soften the blow, if if we could increase some, and because we know that it's going to be a bigger number coming. We know that. I know you need the foundation to base those numbers, but we know it's going to be a bigger number, and I don't want to put a big number in front of our residents in the next year. So I'm for an increase in how you do that to put that into the reserve to prepare us to dampen the blow. So I support that as well.
Yeah. So if I can just make a suggestion, maybe we just continue through the revenue expenses slides, and then we can review that at the back, because one of the last slides actually shows the fiscal transfers. So it'd be the perfect slide to have on the screen when we're talking about that kind of strategy. So with your leave, Your Worship, I'll just try and keep motoring through. And all right. So just a little bit of breakdown on where the revenue comes from. So some of it's stuff that we create ourselves. The water cost transfer, you'll see that when we get into our operating fund as well. Essentially, it's money that the municipal district will pay into the utility company as an offset for the cost of the water used by the fire department. There's a regulation that sets the maximum amount available. We are well below the maximum amount available. But anything we do here, if we tried to give some more money to the utility through that particular mechanism, it will drive property tax rates up significantly. Because it was evaluated at one point, and we calculated what the maximum amount would have been, which would have been roughly $500,000, could be theoretically transferred by regulation, but unfortunately your general operating fund is not in a position to handle that, even if we wanted to, without a very significant tax increase. So we kept with the 125, which is what the municipality has been doing for quite a long time. So, and it's probably realistic as to what is actually used by the fire trucks filling the tanks and whatnot. So, and then it's just miscellaneous. It could be just about anything. Interest on overdue accounts, that speaks to Councillor Greenlaw's comments about uncollected accounts right now. If collections come in, obviously that money appears, and we do budget to collect some of that. It's down a bit from it's up a bit in 2024. But hopefully, with any luck, we'll start finding that number decrease in the coming years as we get our collection system increase and gets a little bit more efficient. So transfers in the utility, we bring in and out surpluses and deficits, much like the operating fund, which you heard about from your auditors when they talked about the second year surpluses. It's handled a little differently in the utility, as we have the ability to spread deficits and whatnot over 5 years. Is it, Frank? 4 years. And so we don't have to take all that hit in 1 year, especially when it's a decent deficit. So Frank has a spreadsheet that lays out pluses and minuses across a number of years to try and mitigate the impacts of those numbers. He's Mr. Godso is our spreadsheet guru, and he keeps a lot of things tracked for us that the rest of us probably wouldn't get to keep on. So we always appreciate that. Switching over to the expense side, obviously there's a few different areas that we spend money. This one is on the water supply, specifically on the administrative costs. So this is some of these administrative wages would be money that's spent by the utility back over to the MD to pay for the staff that's paid that the MD has, but not a huge change here. We've got what we got? We got an increase on the administrative wages, Frank. But
well, the administrative wages represent the share of our administrative personnel, and as it relates to how much time we think that they're spending over on the utility side. So wages for all of our staff we do an allocation. And we say, well, basically, we look at what percentage, and some are higher. For example, we look at our receivable department. They've got a higher percentage that's going to the utility, where someone like myself would have a lower percentage. But that's basically where that's coming from.
Purification and treatment. These are the building blocks of our potable water supply. So you've got our maintenance for the building, we've got our chlorine, and all of the costs that we have for sending samples out for testing and getting reports back to demonstrate that we're in accordance with all the guidelines. So transmission and distribution is where probably pretty much the bulk of our expenses are in the utility. Now we are seeing a decrease there in the overall cost of the program. Was there anything specific there, Sean, about what brought that number down this year?
Not that I can tell you.
Frank?
Basically what we do, I mean, we're looking to budget, but when we're doing the analysis, we base it on actual, and we're actually going back basing on the actual from the year before, since we have a full year for 2022. So it's going to vary depending on what the actual numbers were, but I don't base it on the budget. I base it on what actually went through and the wages that we had. So if it's down, that means that the actual wages that we had going to utility, and we do a transfer every month based on how much time some of our staff are spending over there, and some staff that are full-time over there. We do that transfer every month, and that is the basis for determining how much is going to be sitting here, not necessarily the budget from the previous year.
That's always the challenge with doing the allocation method, is that we take our best guess, and sometimes we're right, and sometimes we're not right. To our favor in this particular year, as costs have gone down a bit, so good for the utility program for sure. Your worship.
So if, for instance, water main breaks on a Saturday, it's going to be fixed, is it just water department personnel, or would operations personnel help out? And if they do, is that journaled back? So, okay, good, thank you.
For those who may be watching online, that was a confirmation that it is journaled back. No, head nods don't always work with the camera system, guys. I don't know if anybody's watching at the moment, but that's okay.
So what we're doing, we're basing it on actuals, but we might not capture it in the budget this year, but the actuals will show up in the next budget, so it does get captured at some point, right?
Yeah, I'm working 2 years behind when I'm doing the calculations for my estimates, because I have a full year. But it is based on the actual. So in this situation, I'm looking at how, and to answer his question, if someone, regardless whether it's somebody that would normally be in our streets department or somebody that's full-time in our utility department, all of our payroll runs through our general fund. And then we do an allocation over, and that's done monthly. So, but we are working a year behind, so it's a bit of a challenge because anything can change that. But, you know, I have a better handle on what actually happened than to take a look at a budget and say, well, you know, we budgeted $200,000, so it's going to go up 5%. So, you know, it can vary, but it's a best guess, but because anything can change that.
No, understandable. Okay, Jeff.
Sure, and I know sometimes people ask about the cross-connection control program. It's been in our books for a long, long time. It is a legal requirement that it be there. It's not really, there is I think there's a document that sits in Sean's office that talks about the cross-control, and they come check it once in a while, but there's not really much cost that goes through there, but it is a regulatory requirement to be there. So if you're ever really, really interested in what a cross-control connection program is, let Sean know. I'm sure he'll get you a copy of the report. Okay. So this is our source of supply. So this is up at the top end of our system. Basically, not a huge change. Again, a little slight reduction there for in the budget, which is, again, we see that is all that part of that sharing that it's where those reductions are sitting. So it's those new allocations, getting a little bit more hopefully accurate on our guesses there. And so yeah, so there's our total for our water supplies for 2024 is $1.267 million. It's not cheap to run a utility, that's for sure, but it is certainly important that we do all these things the right way. Sewage and collection and disposal side of things, again, administration. starting to see the numbers kind of go the other direction on this one. So obviously, what we know here is that a fair bit of those wage allocations were on sewer projects in the year that Frank was using as his baseline. Pretty much everything else, though, we're trying to hold the line as best we can to keep the operation running as it has.
Councilor Wright?
Thank you. I did notice on the sewerage collection and disposal and on the water side, there's a line called office computer service, and those each, I mean, they're small when you're looking at a budget this size, but they each went up about 50%. Is that a new system that's being installed, or is that, again, based on actual, just looking at the last year, what was actually under sewage? If you go back, no, maybe it's on the next page, just a second.
Without looking at it, essentially what we do is we have a number of different costs related to our computer system, and we allocate those. Some of it is based on softwares, some of it might be based on hardware, but we do that allocation overall. So it's more, whenever you were dealing with something here, basically on the utility side, there may be some direct costs there, but a lot of these costs are transfer costs. They're costs that we allocate over to there based on what percentage we feel that the utility department's going to use of that cost.
All right, so this is the for the collection system. Small increase in the maintenance line there, being the driving factor, and more asphalt. We were always trying to find more asphalt. It's a ongoing struggle for the department and on the utility and on the general side. But we always have hopes and dreams of being able to access more asphalt and do more asphalt projects. So we are budgeting to try and get a little bit more on the utility side this year as well. Lift station, yeah, it's pretty much, again, by most intents and purposes, the status quo budget for the lift station. We throughout all of our budgets, we are budgeting for electrical increases because we know they don't tend to go down. They always go up, the cost of electricity. And maintenance, every year the lift station gets older, and every year sometimes needs a little extra care. But nothing that we know of that should be of overly great concern. Knock wood, right?
So are we starting to see any savings for water and sewer separation and updated pumps? Like anything? Are we I mean, obviously we're not. I just wonder if are we seeing anything in their power bills lowering, or has the no, well, I guess the flow's lower too, isn't it? So our numbers should. I'll let you go.
We budgeted for higher electricity due to the cost, not the consumption. I Googled it somewhere that New Brunswick's rates were going to go up 4.8% for 2024. So anywhere I saw electricity, I added 4.8%. If we knew our consumption was down, we lowered it, but I'm not aware of anything that we're expecting to be lower. So it's basically a 4.8% increase.
And that also is where, Your Worship, that as you say, with working from actuals that are often a year and a half behind, you may see those improvements have a little lag feature before you start seeing them in the budget documents, because they have to become an actual, and then they get used for budgeting, a year and a half later. So you might see some of these things maybe not decrease, but not increase as quickly as they might otherwise have. So, so treatment and disposal. So be out at the lagoon site. Small increase, $8,000 roughly. Again, nothing. We try to keep everything as close as we can. Big one being basically electricity again. The intent of the utility is always to try and keep it as close to a status quo budget as we can, and I think they've done an admirable job trying to do it again this year. So here we're in the fiscal services. This is where we should get into some of the discussion. So you'll see here interest and bank charges and long-term interest current debentures for that relates to our debts on the water side. And that's not unusual for any utility system to be carrying a debt because the capital is very, very expensive to try and cash flow. So on the sewer side, same idea. Usually when we're doing the projects, it gets split pretty close to 50-50 when we're doing those projects, depending on the nature of the specific rebuild. So here we go. Here's we're getting into the transfers. This is where Councillor Wright wanted to talk about reserves. So you see there that in this year, 15,256, a decrease over last year for the utility capital reserve. You can see there one of the deficits that we're bringing in this year, based on the 4-year rotational program, and. So here would be, if committee wants to discuss reserves and putting money away for capital, that would be where the end of the line for our budget, actually, showing the balance for the 2778 balances off against the revenue we showed you. So anything we did in here to add money to the reserve would have to drive rates up.
You might be looking for a little consensus there so you can make that adjustment. Yeah.
You're allowed to help.
So what's the feeling of the room, Councillor?
Just ask a question. I haven't, of course, sat here and didn't pay much attention to municipal politics because I wasn't a townie before. So what was the town's standard procedure in the past? Was it a percentage, and how does that affect? Is it a percentage just of the user fees, not of the user fees, but of the consumption, and that gets applied to our percentage on the sewer side? Is that what council has traditionally done in the past?
Sure, yeah, it's absolutely been a percentage-based applied to the rate structure. It's, I think in my time here, it's been, I think we did 1 year, that might have been even somewhere, I want to say 8% is probably the biggest one I've seen. 10, I'm corrected by corporate services. And you'll recall from the GemTech report that 10 is may not be an unusual amount if one were to accept all the recommendations of that report over the next number of years. The general rule for most CAOs in the industry in Canada is when it comes to anything, whether it's tax rate, user fees, 3% is usually considered zero. It's holding the line because you're trying to hold off inflation. So here, a no rate increase is kind of like a -3. But we're doing these out of order in the way that I built the slide deck. But inflation in New Brunswick currently is sitting at 4% year over year. So I mean, just anything below that is a benefit to the end user in a way. Because if you're just trying to cover your inflationary costs, you'd be at minimum 4%. That's the unfortunate truth of the environment we live in. But yeah, that's if that gives you an earmark to work from, that's how it has been, just a percentage-based adjustment.
So just to kind of put it in perspective, let's say we did a 3%, and would you say the average water bill is 2.25 every quarterly? Am I close to that, or am I over?
I don't have on the top of my head what an average water bill would be, but I think in the past when we were looking at this, we're assuming that consumption is going to stay constant to what the budget is already reflecting. So if we're doing a 10% increase, then you're going to get a rough idea by just applying it to what's there on the budget.
Yeah, just kind of bring it down to layman's terms, so, for someone that's paying a $200 water bill every quarter, say, what would their increase be if we did a 3%? I guess, well,
3% of 2.25 would be about $7.50 a quarter.
yeah, so let's say, so it could be $10, say. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but I'm looking at the whole bill, like, yeah. Okay, so just kind of,
I guess.
there's only 3 of us in here paying water bills. What do you guys think?
Oh, I'm paying too.
Oh, yeah? Yeah?
In town, I have a building in town.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Sorry about that. Yeah, just, is there a way that you could show us some numbers? And then we can kind of find out what that is and kind of compare like a guesstimate of where we got to get to, and then kind of pad the path, so to speak. I don't know. Your best shot in the dark there.
It really boils down to how much council wants to slide into the reserves. If you wanted to go off the asset management plan, you'd be putting millions of dollars in there, right? Or at least hundreds of thousands. You're not going to do that based on a rate change, obviously. But we have administrative justification to argue that should be the case. So it's, I guess, if you want a few options presented when we do final adoption, that's fine. My counter to committee would be if whether committee could set an upper limit on the percentage, and then we can work backwards from there and show you how it would play out on the quote unquote average bill. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With infrastructure upgrades.
Yearly?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So I think
Yeah.
could have a look at it and
We got some quick math
Oh,
over here.
go ahead.
I have a calculator. I have a calculator for everything. So I just ran through and I just increased the rates by 3%. And it was at 137.23 before the increase, and it would be 141.34 after. And 137 might be on the light end, but we have a lot of our customers that are at that level. So you're not talking huge increases here at that level, at 3%. We're talking on the 137, we're talking $4.
That's the 3%. So I got a question for you. This is our sale of the service right here. That's our revenue. So if we apply that.
Confusion to confusion.
So,
Last time we talked, or sometime in the past we talked, we had a big amount of money owing by one particular outfit, Gonongs, and it was quite a lot of money. And then we had almost the same amount of residential money that was never picked up. So you were saying that both of those going to be deferred next year, or are we going to still continue with that, or are we going to bring any revenue in from that part at all?
No, the collection of any outstanding amounts just will not affect your current year revenues. They're revenues from a previous year. So it'll offset an outstanding balance, right? So it doesn't, if everybody that ever owed us money here showed up with checks tomorrow, it doesn't create a windfall of cash into 2024's budget. So we just...
No, it's on our balance sheet, so it's just showing as owing, so it just reduces that. If anything, it would actually have a negative effect to the budget because we have interest charges in here. And those interest charges would go down if everyone, if we had that payment. So if anything, collecting it is good for cash flow, but it would actually have a negative effect on the budget.
You've got eight.
So
There's $85,000 in revenue from interest from overdue accounts. So if there were no overdue accounts, we lose $85,000 in revenue.
yeah. Kind of
Oh, babe.
yeah.
Well, the other side of that, though, is that we'd be paying less interest on the money that we have, that we're borrowing, in order to be able to fund those receivables. So it does offset. but it's not going to be, certainly not going to be a one-to-one.
So if I may, so I think what we'll take away from this is to go and take a look, do some comparative numbers on rate changes for the purposes of feeding, on the rate changes specifically for the purpose of feeding reserves. So not to get eaten up by any other operational activities, but just to feed reserves. Bring those back, maybe a couple of options there, and with a recommendation from us that hopefully at the next meeting, council, sitting with their full powers, can adopt a final utility budget. If I have that understanding correct from the committee. Great. Okay.
So we're done with the utilities? Okay. I just want to clarify, when I was talking about water and sewer separation and savings, I'm thinking everyone understands what I'm saying, but some might not, including the audience, is if we're separating the sewer away from the storm drains, which we do a lot in these new projects, that's less treated water that we're running through filtration systems and all that sort of thing, right? So that's savings. That's kind of what I was talking about there, just in case everyone doesn't understand. But anyway, okay. Let's go on to the big budget, the operating budget. And that will be you again, Jeff?
Yes, let me back up my slideshow here. Try and click quickly to not let you guys see all the secrets. There we go. Okay. So this is the budget everybody likes to talk about, because it's the one that we live with on a more daily basis, and the citizens see on a regular basis. So just context setting here, looking at the 2023 residential tax rates. And a reminder that the rural folks get to pay a special levy to the government of New Brunswick for their road maintenance. So when we start seeing 0.5s versus the 1.6, 1.5 in town, there is another half of that. There's another side of that coin that rurals pick up. So those are the rates. These are the local rates. These are what we collect and get to keep. And then the 0.4415 numbers, they go to the government for their road programs. So we had in 2023, we had the 1.5 multiplier for the non-residential industrial tax rates, which is the one of the newest tools given to municipalities from the government of New Brunswick, is the ability to set that ratio anywhere between 1.4 and 1.7, which is a significant swing, which we later in the evening we may look at how that works for us, and as a potential tool to be applied. And I did want to put a note in here. I didn't we do have the BIA levy in Ward 2. That's 20 cents, but as it doesn't apply to everybody in town, I just wanted it noted. I didn't include it in the chart because it doesn't apply to absolutely everybody. So in the 2023, this was what our budget looked like. So we ran a budget of about just a hair under $12.5 million, and broken down into 4 taxing subunits. St. Stephen being the old town site, what we call now, essentially now Ward 2, or the St. Stephen tax unit. And the other ones are not broken down by electoral wards. They're broken down by the government's wisdom on areas that share common services to a degree, plus or minus, that they thought should be treated similarly. There was hope that we would only have 2, but we ended up with 3, which was fine with us. We just had to make it work. So the tax rates, again, that we collect are on the bottom here, 0.537 in Western Charlotte, 0.535 in Dufferin, 5621 St. David, and 15636. Roughly in 2023, we reduced the tax rates as opposed to 2022. Rural's got somewhere between 3 and 4% decrease, whereas the St. Stephen town site went down by about 1%. That was a strategy employed by myself and the transition facilitator on the fact that there wasn't an elected council to oversee policy decisions regarding public money, so we didn't make any. is basically what it boiled down to. We tried to keep things very tight, and allow this council, now that you're here and you've got your feet under you as elected officials, to make any policy decisions moving forward. So it was not necessarily well received by our friends at the government that we'd cut taxes across the board. And we had a lot of questions about it. But strategically, I thought, and ethically, I thought it was the right thing to do, to basically just be a caretaker and hold the fort as best we could, and then turn it over to an elected council once they had office. So that's the context that from 2023, that the budget we are working with at this particular moment.
Can I?
Yep.
As you know, I'm not really a big fan of all the different tax or different costs for different services, and they're all getting the same service. And I'm not talking rural to town, I'm talking rural to rural. Like, I'd really like to try to get that in a better state, because it'd be easier for you guys to do the budget as well. Like, there's so many moving, like, why would, you know, can you just, I know you explained to me before, but just for everyone else, like, why we can't get those numbers, the cost for service, everyone pays the same cost for service, I guess.
If I could understand, if I could replicate the rationale of the municipal reform process utilized by GNB, I would be a much smarter man than I am today. There was no rationale presented to me as to why the tax units were the way they were. The facilitator and I actually had requested from GNB at one point that we only have two tax rates. We have a urban and a rural. That, you know, because we were a single service center type of municipality, those that came in for things, whether it's groceries or the rec center or whatever, it wasn't that different whether you came from the east or the west. Like it was all, we were kind of centralized the way our municipality was designed, and the request went into the black box in Fredericton, and out popped 4 taxing units that we had to work with. Now, with the exception of a limit on how much a rural tax rate can go up in a single year, there's no regulations on what the elected council does with their tax rates. That's a policy decision for you. If this council determined that a two rate system was beneficial, was the appropriate approach, you could work towards that over time. If you wanted it to be 3, like you have a lot of flexibility now that we did not have creating 2023's budget because of the weird nature of that arrangement. But that's certainly a conversation that could be had as you see the challenges that we're going to go through in a few minutes.
Like even in our 3 zone or our 2 rural zones, there's different tax rates in one zone. Mm-hmm. Like it's. Yeah, so I mean, I think we got to at least get that part balanced, and then we can start working on the difference between rural and town. We got to take some steps forward on that as well. My opinion. That's to be council, and probably lean heavy on the rural councilors on that.
No, but at this point, I'm just trying to refresh one's memory about 2023, and those options weren't available to us. So, but we can certainly talk about things as we move forward. Okay, so 2024. First important piece of information that came out from GNB for us was our assessment base. And I think everybody who saw this when it came in got quite excited. Total change being the important one here. Let's see if I can get my cursor over there. 8.26% increase in our assessment. That's one of the nicest increases we've had in our area in a very long time. Now, when you break it down, obviously, only just over 2% of that was new construction. A good 6% of that is, reassessment of currently existing properties. So, you'd like to see that new construction climb, and we're continuing to do a lot of work to make it do so. But, yep.
So new construction, but there's also renovations would cause those other assessments that we're not, counting, that could have raised their assessments. But yeah, the assessments went up obviously because of sales, but yeah, and availability. Sorry.
So you see here, there we go. See here on the right, the bar graph there, 2023's our assessment base was $647.58 million. spiking its way up to $701.09 million. This came in the midst of, you'll see in this box up in the corner here, appeals and whatnot for reassessments were still ongoing. So I can tell you the great majority of the results of most appeals were no change in this year. I get a report every few weeks, and I just get a bunch of amount reduced 0, 0, 0, 0. So assessment services has been very strong in their assessments for 2024. So that was the exciting news that we got. Then when we started trying to work on budget, we started taking a good hard look at a few things. The unconditional grant went down by $202,000. Inflation, as I said earlier, 4% in New Brunswick year over year right now. On a $12.5 million budget, that's basically $500,000 there. Our second year surplus. Last year, if you do your math right, we brought in 2021 surplus. 2021 surplus was great because we didn't run anything in 2021 because COVID shut us down. So we had a great big surplus that we brought in. 2022, we started operating again, and we started operating with COVID restrictions, which means we had a bunch of costs and whatnot that kept hitting us. So our second year surplus was decreased year over year by another $257,000. And our police contract was probably the nicest surprise of increases, was only went up by $66,000 for 2024. But just those four things alone, we were starting in the hole by over $1 million on a $12.5 million budget. I can tell you it was not happy times around the department head table as we tried to figure out how we were going to pull that together. And as I say on the bottom here, those four things there don't include things we know were happening, like 20% increases in our insurance premiums, the electrical going up. I wrote 5.8, but I think Sean said it was 4.8. So probably a typo on my part. But so we had a lot of things stacking up against us that were outside of our control. So when we get into this budget, one thing that I hope you are able to recognize is the creativity and the work of the team to find savings throughout the budget to bring this number down. I will do the spoiler alert and tell you we were not successful in balancing the budget using the current tax rates. There will be, when we get to the bottom, there will be a deficit that needs to be addressed, and we'll talk about the tools to do that. But I hope you're as impressed as I was with the team about how far we made it. So here's the overall 2024 budget. So looking at a budget of just over $13 million in 2024 as it currently stands. And we'll get into each of these areas about what the changes are. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but excuse me. But that is the fate that we're looking at right now. Is, but roughly $500,000 increase in our costs, given all things put together. So our revenue highlights. A few things we assume. We were assuming in this budget that the Milltown Pool is remaining free to the public. We did add lines in to accommodate the Oak Bay Community Hall, which was not in the previous budget. It's not a lot of money, but there is some seed money that the current that's still out there with the hall that we can use for any immediate needs. A small increase, about $900 increase in rental income from the RCMP building. You see the grant number there, $1.6 million from the province of New Brunswick, which is, as I say, significantly lower than it was last year. Our surplus number there, again, significantly lower than it was the previous year. We are proposing here a 5% increase in user fees associated with the Garcelon Civic Center. We have not changed rates in this facility since 2012. And given record inflations and things like that, it was time we thought, to consider doing that. And just 5% can sound like a lot, so what we did is I pulled up the basic access charges here. And for normal day pass, you're looking at 50 cents to 30 to 50 cents on the fee, because this isn't an exceptionally high price facility to use. A little bit more when you get into the more expensive annual passes and that, but we're hoping council will look favorably on this proposal. It doesn't solve all our problems. It does help with the escalating costs for running the facility. So, are we good with that chart? Yes. Okay. So if there are any questions, okay. So as you know, we don't tend to spend a lot of time on revenue for the simple fact that we don't have a lot of revenue tools at this time. We have property tax and user fees. So when the government delivers on their promise to get us some new tools, that part of of our discussion might be more robust. Hopefully Councillor Greenlaw and UMNB continue to hold their feet to the fire on those, because they will be greatly appreciated by municipalities when they do come through. On the expenditure side, we've assumed no changes to the council costs. The way the bylaw for councillor stipends and whatnot is written, there isn't an automatic escalator clause in there, as like the old town of St. Stephen had. So I wanted to be upfront about that, so it's something that you folks can talk about and decide if that's where you want to leave things. But at this point, we didn't have the authority to change it, and so we didn't. Administrative staff, so the way that PNB, we have very detailed charts, and as I said, Mr. Godso is our king of spreadsheets, despite all the challenges we had today, Frank. But when we have to present it to the province of New Brunswick, we have to roll a bunch of this stuff into common numbers. So you'll see like administrative staff, and so I wanted to you'll see on some of these slides where I try and break down to show you what you're paying for, because it's not really easy to see in the way they've conglomerated things. So here you have my office and the executive assistant. It was up there. I forgot to type it in. As well as the administrative assistant that council approved last year as well falls into this section. It's kind of under general admin. In corporate services, you see the list of folks there that get paid for out of here. So just so you know, that's where we're sitting. Obviously, the big salary increase is related to the 2 new positions that were added to the team, and are greatly appreciated. So on the administrative services side, we've maintained our budget for solicitor. That ebbs and flows by what's going on in the municipality, obviously. But if you compared it to the 2023 actuals right now, you'd see the actuals in 2023 are much higher. But that had more to do with our collective bargaining and the legal counsel that was used as lead negotiator for our side. Fortunately, we don't have to do that for a good 5 years again, so we returned it back to our normal status. Audit is we're hoping for $20,000 roughly. These things kind of ebb and flow a little bit too, and the as you know, the last audit you just received was the last audit for the town of St. Stephen. We've changed our dynamics a little bit as far as becoming the municipal district. So there may be some additional costs related to that as far as the audit goes, but we're hoping that we'll be able to make it work with the 20,000 there. Cost of assessment, one of those things that we have zero control over, that we just get requisition from the province. So that one's another one that's gone up on us without our control to $146,000. Regional and collaborative services from the RSC, although you'll see the RSC ones kind of pop up throughout different areas of our budget. These are all the mandates and whatnot that come from the RSC. They did an admirable job of bringing some of these numbers down in this year's budget, so I'll give them credit for that. And of course, liability insurance, which the insurance industry is crazy. And when we're hoping for 20% increases on a year-to-year basis, something's got to give eventually. There's hope. There's I have some cautious optimism that maybe the province of New Brunswick municipalities will form the reciprocal and look at that, because I do think there will be an opportunity for savings for everybody if that is followed. But for the time being, we have to have it, and it's not something we can control. Other things that we deal with in administration. Again, you'll see here, if you compare 2023 to 2024, not a lot of changes at all. A little bit more travel and training. That's for the corporate services team. They're trying to up their training game with their staff, which has been asked for and hoped for a few years. So that's good. The civic relations budget is coming down. I had bumped that up in 2023, not knowing what the amalgamation into the MD would look like. As far as the civic relations budget, it's a budget that I utilize for sponsorships and grants. There are little small things here and there. Our actuals in 2023 indicated that we could return back to what used to be the town's number, which was $5,000. So we returned that to there. Community Grants Fund, that's council's grant money. One thing that our council committee should be thinking about, maybe before we look at adoption of a final budget, is the manner in which this money is used. I would like to attach a grant policy to these funds. One of the things that I noticed on my review this year is the great majority of the money that's being utilized in the grants fund are the same items every year, and basically it's becoming part of certain agencies' operating money. That was never the intent of the community grants fund. It was supposed to be seed money to get things off the ground and kind of try new things and get things going, but then run it independent. But when you look back over the last few years and you're seeing the same amount to the same people with basically the carbon copy request letter that just changes the date at the top, it makes you wonder what the point is here. If we want to support certain agencies with their operations, that's fine. Council can enter into multi-year funding agreements with them, and we'll operationalize those dollars into the appropriate area of our budget. But having it just hang out under the community grants where we're saying we got $50,000 to do for people to try things and do new things, when really when the first meeting that we tried to get these things adopted, we're like, well, you have these, you got 30,000 of it that's already allocated based on past practice, right? So it's one of those things that we would strongly recommend that council take a look at how you manage these funds, to not become a de facto just operating sponsor of agencies. As much as we may appreciate the work that these agencies are doing, if they're doing a special project, it might be worth it, but just routine operating dollars is probably not where the municipality should be from a management point of view. So that you'll see something coming on that right quickly, because we have been working on a policy to go alongside those monies for 2024.
So just my little thoughts on that is, if there's some of those funds that we are giving out, if there's return to us, we'd look at those a different value, right? Not just like one-off startup funding, but like, for example, things that we, encourage events, and then we get beer sales, for example. Like there's something we do want to incentivize and keep it moving. So is there some way we could, I totally agree there should be a formula based on what we do, because it makes it easier to give out those grants, but not just cut and dried.
No, your policy can be whatever council deems your policy to be. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your flexibility to do what you want, but I would say that we've sat in this room in public session, and Mr. Tozer's been grilled, well, what did we do last year for XYZ agency, whether it's the hospital foundation or whomever, right? I would argue that if it's automatic that the municipality is going to do those, we operationalize those into a different area of the budget and say, that's part of environmental health to support the hospital. It's going to be part of the budget, and we do it. Whereas these monies should be specifically for innovative projects, or you can have two different ways of approaching a lot of these things. And if you want to, we have a development incentive policy. It doesn't go through community grants, right? It has its own section of the budget that gets paid for from there. They win, we win, the way we've set up the scenario. So there are ways to do that. I would just recommend that the community grants money really be, we tailor what we're doing there more than we have historically.
Yeah, I got a better understanding now. Thanks, Jeff. Councilor Rodas?
Yeah, I think the beauty in that too is that you can actually set up the community grants fund in a way that it aligns with our strategic priorities. So, if we see that housing was an issue that was listed that maybe we wanted to advocate for, but there's somebody in our community who's actually actively working on that initiative and it's a newer initiative, then it would be great to be able to support that, because I think Jeff's right when he says we get tied up in a lot of funding it's always been that way, that we've always, but in the nonprofit world, you don't write any grant where you say operationally we'd like this money and they hand it over. I mean, there usually is a report and it has to benefit the person who's giving you the money. So, you know, if you're applying for a grant with United Way needs to know it aligns with their mandate. They don't just pass it along. So I actually do think that's a great idea and a good way to support newer initiatives in our community who are trying to start up and need that extra boost, especially when we're looking at these newer complex issues that we're facing.
It was just food for thought for the committee, but it's something that I've been struggling with for the last couple of years, as far as how we're managing that, a fund that I actually proposed to council 5 years ago to try and spur some innovative activity, and kind of watching it become operational money has been difficult for me, just from my own perspective. But so I think we should take a look at that, how we're doing that. So that's basically our general government stuff. It's part of our budget. So just a summary. We did add the 2 administrative positions. There was a small increase, $7,000 increase to part-time for corporate services support. The $20,000 for actuarial is I remember it was once every 3, right, Frank?
Every 3 years.
3 years. When we get to tools to help with the budget, things like that are kind of prime for the operating reserve, because they're one-offs every once in a while, and then you have time to put some money back in the reserve to catch it the next time around. So we talked about the additional $4,000 for corporate services training, the reduction of civic relations, the increased assessment, and cyber costs. So, and we have assumed in the budget, for the budget purposes of budget, that the 2.75% that's in the union contract would be applied to the non-union staff as we had done in 2023, just matching it up. That'll be a council decision for down the road, but the money is there to do that should council authorize those expenditures. We wait for council authorization before we do any of that. So protective services, next section. A favorite topic around the table of late is our policing services contract. We always talk about the $2.2 million we spent on the actual policing contract, but our commitment to the police, to the RCMP, actually goes beyond that as their landlord, right? Because we own the police station, so we do have costs related to the building maintenance, cleaning contract, electricity, taxes. So basically, when you really put it together, we're at just over 2.3 million in our policing. I know we'll talk about later some of the ideas about alternative policing options potentially being explored. We're budgeting for our CMP, quite frankly, because we couldn't get out of the contract right now if we wanted to. That will take time and a lot of work to figure out. But so just budgeting for it doesn't preempt the exploration of other alternatives if council so wishes. But we do have to budget to pay them, and we do that.
Just historically, is there a reason why we're the landlord? Is that something that's kind of just always been the way? Has it always been that way, or is that a newer thing just as a new councillor? Is that an older thing? Is that typical or standard for other municipalities to offer a central building?
I'm not sure how it became a relationship with the town of St. Stephen. It long predated my arrival here. I will say that it's a mixed bag about what municipalities do. We had been advised years ago that the last lease agreement we had was the final lease, because the RCMP had intentions of building their own facility. They were supposed to be the next on the list after Dieppe was finished completion. We have not heard anything since on that front. We were kind of looking forward to not being that. Committee is well aware of my managerial position about us being landlords, and it's looking forward to getting out of that game with this client. But that didn't come to fruition, and it's not required, but it has been the norm around here for quite a while.
Yeah, Jeff, does this week, I believe that St. Stephen will be receiving one police officer over in the next 2 years. Does that actually affect this? Are we getting one immediately, or is it we have no idea?
No idea when they'll have boots on the ground, but it will drive the costs up without a doubt, having another officer on the roster. The only thing that I can say that I will say on this one is, and I don't do it often, you know this, but kudos to GNB for stepping up with the retro costs on the policing situation. The reason we only went up by $66,000 is because the government of New Brunswick ate the extra costs for the retro pay over and above the mitigation fund that they had collected from us. So I'll take the moment to say thank you and kudos to the folks at Public Safety for their initiative on that regard, because had taking another hit here on this line would have really hurt. So,
Councillor Greenlaw.
Yeah, I'd just add to that, the minister indicated at that meeting there that he was going to fund those additional positions for 2 years. But after that, it is on the regions to pay for that. So we got 2 years of grace on that.
Yeah, that was my two fingers that's holding up. Yeah. But yes, correct. Go ahead, Jeff.
Moving on to fire protection. So this is fire protection is a shared service across our taxing units. So you won't see too many lines that are specific to any region, because we centralize everything and then allocate the cost back out, trying to keep it as equitable as possible. So here, slight increase in our firefighting force, mainly on the salary side, which is collective bargaining implications for the most part. Everything else was, we held the line or tried to bring them down a little bit to create some budget room. Decrease on the special events, we had temporarily increased them for the 150th celebrations for the fire department, and of course that only happened once, so we were able to draw that budget back down a little bit. On the administrative side, again, actually a small reduction there that we were able to find from there, mainly from the general advertising line, trying to streamline, be more strategic in our advertising endeavors with using taxpayer money. This sheet's a little bit outdated because after I was building it, we did realize we had forgotten to share the fire alarm system across everybody. So the total cost will be the same. It'll just be allocated to each subunit on the same basis as the rest of the department. It was just an oversight. It was actually an oversight in 2023 that we happened to catch just when we were building stuff this morning. Here you'll see the water cost transfer that we talked about on the utility side. Where it was revenue to the utility, it's expense to the fire department. Yeah, there's not too much else to really highlight in here. So we will make that change before final as far as sharing those that one section. Mr. Godsow's already done it in his sheet. It was actually my delay in getting it posted into the slide for you folks. So fire stations, we should pluralize that actually. Now, Frank, the header for that one for fire station, we have more than one station now, so we should. We've been catching a lot of little things like that as far as from the amalgamation as we go through. But yeah, really, budget's doing our best to hold the line on everything. Dispatch fees, that's a calculation based on our total assessment. So our total assessment goes up, so do our dispatch fees from St. John Dispatch. But so another fee that we have no control over, and yet another fee we have no control over is that fire cost share with the rural district. We still have our concerns. Administration has our concerns about the fire boundaries and paying for services that we may not necessarily require. But that endeavor to adjust those lines will take some time and work, and probably some political backing at this point. We've tried. But for now, those are requisition numbers, so they're in as they were requested from the agencies. So your total fire is there. And just a note there, the fire chief, 5 full-time firefighters, 28 volunteers, and we used an anticipated call volume of about 280 calls in the year in building the budget. So that's kind of the benchmark. If we're under, we'll probably save a little bit of money, and if we're over, we're probably going to cost us a little bit of money. And of course, we continue to recruit volunteers in the hopes of building up those rosters a little bit more. But we don't tend to worry too much about the small budget implications for adding a firefighter. We find their presence far more valuable, and we'll find a way to accommodate it as needed. Other stuff, other protection that falls under protective services is bylaw enforcement, building inspection, animal and pest control, crossing guards. Again, holding the line as much as we can. The SPCA contracted animal control. We did not, at the time of the 2023 budget, we did not have the numbers from the province as to what the rural animal control costs were going to be. They blessed us with those after the budget had to be passed. So they've gone up in accordance with the appropriate, again, build requisition number until such time as their contracts with the government expire, and then we will have to enter into our own arrangements for animal control, whether that's SPCA or a private agency or whatever we choose. We have been in active dialogue with SPCA about the long term, so we'll continue to work on that front. And the RSC Public Safety Committee, they're still, as we've talked about before, they're still figuring out their mandate and what their role should be. But they are required to have one, and they're required to pay to have it in their budget, so which means we're required to have it in our budget, even when they're small numbers. So regulations and law are sometimes tricky. So there we have the total budgets for the protective services departments, up $100,000 roughly overall, and again mainly in salaries and collective bargaining wages. Really apply there. Transportation services, aka Public Works. Again, you'll see that outside of wages, and wages are a heavy driver of this area, we're doing our darndest to keep everything status quo or better. We do have a little bit of an increase there relates to radios. That's a ongoing saga of equipment replacement and delivery timelines and things like that for certain pieces of equipment. But I don't know what else. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Nope. Okay, you're in the wrong section? Cool. Okay, no, that's fine.
I do got a question.
Yep.
So back to fire services. I know that we, there's our costs for the services in that rural area, but is there also any return coming back where we provide service that would wash that?
Yeah, there's a small revenue that comes in for an area that Oak Bay Fire Hall services into St. David.
Yeah, and also for us into Upper Mills
So-
and that area.
So there's a back and forth billing that's involved there.
We pay out more than we get, I think.
Yes, we definitely pay more than we get. But yeah, there's and it's all based on a very interesting calculation. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I believe, if I can remember correctly, it was around 70,000 that we were paying out, but we're getting back about 58. And I was talking with Mr. McCabe, and part of that cost relates to fire trucks that have been purchased over the last 3 years, and we're sort of cost sharing on those arrangements, and that ends in 2024. So that hopefully that'll go down a little bit next year.
Anything else on fire?
Thanks. Sorry to back you up there.
No, not a problem. So we're here to make sure people get with the questions. So yeah, I think we did that one. So these are fees related to our shop. Actually did quite well in this one. Slight $700 reduction. Well done, Sean. Roads and streets. Here you see more asphalt again. Hoping and praying to get more asphalt work done. And concrete as well. No, concrete we took out actually. So yeah, concrete we held the same. Salt we did increase. That was part of a discussion that we've had around this table about trying some salt in lieu of sand in some areas to see how that goes. Part of that will depend on what the price of salt looks like at the time and whatnot, and what kind of weather we get too. It's Mother Nature can be fickle, and depending on temperatures, it depends which product works best for public safety. So, but we are trying to deliver on a council request to try some things if the environment allows us to do that. Street lighting, you'll see this isn't shared into anywhere. The only one that is shared in this area is the traffic services street signs, because we were notified that we are now responsible for some of the signs in the rural area, mainly the blue ones, I believe.
Street signs, yeah.
And whatnot. So we've upped the budget a little bit to accommodate that, and then sharing it across all the taxing subunits. But traffic signals is something that we're going to have to talk about when we really get into capital. As I kind of commented with the public at the public budget session, if you've driven around St. Stephen lately, and if you notice that not all our traffic signals are working, and quite frankly, it's due to their age. We can't find parts. Our equipment is obsolete, and God bless the guys that go hunting for parts for us. We have preliminary budget numbers from the engineers on what we can expect traffic signals to cost. It's not cheap in the least. And anybody who's ever done a renovation project probably knows that when you try to upgrade from old to new, some of the stuff that is connected to that old stuff might need to be updated as well. So we're not too worried about capital tonight, but it's you'll hear that come back because it's a major problem, and it has been for a number of years. So we are, just so you know, we are aware of it, and we are going to have that conversation with you.
For the salt, what's the outcome measurement tool you're going to be using? Is it you're just going to try it out and see how it feels, or do you have a specific way of measuring its success? Because I don't remember Gemtech actually giving us that tool to be able to actually see how effective it is.
Honestly, I don't know. I'm going to be right up front. We're going to try and use more salt. When I talk to the guys there, and some of the, I'm not from St. Stephen, but if you go back a few years, they had an incident where they tried something similar, and they ended up bringing bulldozers into town because the roads got iced up, because salt doesn't work when it gets too cold, and we're still paying for that now in the damage that was done to the streets by having to bring heavy equipment in to remove ice. So we're cautiously optimistic, but at the same token, the weather really determines whether salt will work or it won't. And the experience that they had in Fredericton is one thing. They get much different weather in Fredericton than we do here. So we'll see how it goes. I probably didn't answer your question, but I honestly don't have a good answer for that.
All right, so so backing up the fuel, did you mention why that dropped down 30,000? Fuel.
Yes, we looked at the actual for 2023 and where we are, predicted where we would be at the end of 2023, and take into consideration what the actual costs are. So the 2023 budget we did in 2022 when the costs were very high. If you remember, diesel got quite expensive. Diesel is down, so that's where that savings has come from. The cost of diesel is actually down now, and we're gambling that it's going to stay down.
No problem. It's a good reminder that budget is an educated guess, right? And it always is. We try to do as much homework as we can, and then at some point we have to go with your gut. So, yeah, that's what we did. All right, other transport services. So this is where the airport costs live. I would still argue to committee and to council that reasonable dialogue should be had regarding the potential of seeing if the RSC would take on the airport as a regional asset. I've had initial correspondence with my colleague at the RSC about it. Other jurisdictions have gone that route. Other RSCs have gone that route. Because I do think it is a regional asset more than a local asset. So I think it's something worth exploring, but until, like a lot of things, until some decision is made, we have to budget to operate it. So that's what this budget does. The license is quite high. Again, it's much like those extra trails we talked about in the corporate services department. This is a recertification that NavCan requires us to do every 3 years, 5 years, 5 years. And we're just happen to be due for another one of those, and they're not cheap. Again, potential for operating reserve transfer to cover this off if we wanted to when we're looking at our tools. It's a one-off every so many years. It's not an annual. So it's a prime candidate for that should you choose to go that route. And then we have, again, another RSC regional transportation of $761 that I'm sure they'll use wisely in developing regional transportation.
Just hang on, sorry, not to bump you. I'd like to go to the airport. Just like I said, what we're doing is just holding status quo there. We're just holding the line. The potential is huge if we did work together as a region and actually looked at the big picture and what that could do to the change the region. So I just want to make sure that we're just holding the line. We're just a small airport, but it has a lot of potential. So I just wanted to make sure people understood that that's not a huge budget we got there, but it is, but it could be a better operation for sure.
And just as a heads up, there is a very significant capital request related to the airport as well. When you see the capital list, when we get to capital budgeting, in the neighborhood of $400,000 for a proposed new building out there. So that's not forgotten. It is on a list with a whole bunch of other things that you'll see and have to prioritize as you see fit. But it's not reflected here, but you will see that as an ask that's out there.
And kind of going back to what I was just saying, like I said, that investment would definitely be worthwhile for the airport, but it's not a complete win just for our district. It's a complete win for the whole area. Councillor Greenlaw? Councillor Greenlaw?
Yeah, so are there any sources of revenue from the airport?
The hangars that are out there that are privately owned do have leases as far as leasing land. Those leases have, I think, largely been expired at this point and are in need of renewals and collections. But the historic rate for their lease is significantly lower than what I would expect market to be. So it's something that we're actively reviewing and have asked legal counsel to look at potentially refreshing their lease agreements that are quite old at the moment and probably need a refresh. So it's a work in progress. We don't have anything outside of that really. There's been some inquiries about some agencies that want to run some operations out there that may generate some, but it's been in the early stages.
Councillor Cornish.
Just a question, Jeff, because I haven't been thinking about the airport very much lately. But do we do the plowing and pothole maintenance and things like that for the airport?
We do. We do a lot of the maintenance there. We don't do all the maintenance there. We keep, at least we used to keep old equipment, some of our older equipment out there. I don't know if we do anymore. We did until some of it got really old.
Mm-hmm.
But we arrange for the grass mowing. Do some of it ourselves, some of it we contract out, depending on what's going on. And in fact, this year we took down a tree on a private property because it was becoming a concern for inbound flights. So we got permission from the landowner, and our crew went out and took care of the tree to clear out the flight line too. So we do a fair bit. I know the airport manager always wants us to do a little bit more. That's probably true of all of our departments. But we do take care of that stuff.
So we use our trucks for plowing, or do they have their own equipment they use for that, or do we supply the manpower for their equipment? How is the plowing done?
They have an old half-ton out there with a plow on it that they can do some plowing, but we prefer to do it ourselves.
So we have no equipment like brushes or anything like that for ice removal or anything like that. It's just strictly plowing, and if it gets too bad, you must have to shut it down, I take it.
I'm not aware of it ever getting to the point where we had to shut it down, like, not that I'm aware of. But obviously it's not our top priority, but it does get done. It does get done, and I'm not aware of any issues as far as that goes.
The airport's actually listed in a national publication. So we basically have an obligation to, I mean, it's not going to be the first place to plow, but we do have an obligation to keep it open.
Okay, floor is yours, Jeff.
Moving right along. Just quick little total lines there for you. For 2023, 2.484 versus 2.595 in 2024. Where are we going next? One of the interesting misnomers, environmental health, also known as dumps and landfills. It's a province of New Brunswick heading that we were required to use. So we do have an old dump site that we still pay property taxes on. And we have obviously we have the regional landfill contracts, which is our tonnage going across the scale at Hemlock Knoll. And we have our waste collection fees, which are the contract that council recently adopted for Ward 2, as well as what we're getting billed for from the rural areas for garbage collection at this stage. Again, when those contracts run out, we'll have to refigure out how things are going to work. Again, I think it's a conversation that many of the municipal CAOs anyway would like to have with the RSC regarding how collection is done and versus private contracting versus own staff and see what those numbers would play out like. It's been a topic of conversation, but for now, we're working with the cards we've been dealt, and those are the costs going forward right now. Backing up.
Councillor Wright.
So there's two separate line items, the regional landfill contracts. Is that what was formerly the municipal contract for waste collection, and then the one underneath it, waste collection, is that what we assumed with the?
No, the regional landfill contract is our tipping fees at Hemlock Knoll. So that's the weight going over the scale. Waste collection is the physical collection, paying the hauling contractor.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay. All right. Environmental development. So here's where we have our planning services with our friends at the RSC. We do pay property taxes on the business park. We pay property taxes on a few things. Economic development, of course, is a mandate of the RSC. So that's a requisition, $22,000 there. The grants section, obviously, Future St. Stephen, we've talked about that before. Status quo for their operation. The development incentive grant is a new line that is specifically related to our development incentive bylaw, and starting to get ready to flow some money out to the developers who've taken us up on those opportunities, who are anxious to get paid. So making sure that we've accommodated that. And RSC Community Development, another mandate of the RSC, which is $7,000 that gets requisitioned from us for whatever uses they determine at their level. Any questions on that sheet? Okay. Housing Unit Development Grant, that's a relic. You see it's in 2023. The reason we keep it in here on this presentation is because we're happy to say we paid the last one for an agreement that we had on a housing development. And so that gets to come off the books. So thank you to the developer who took us up on the offer and got their project completed, but we're glad to not have that payment on the books anymore. You'll also see here the our landlord lines, basically. 5 Kings, 6 King Street, 128 Milltown Boulevard, the Oak Bay Community Hall. We didn't really have a good home for the Oak Bay Community Hall, so we slid it in here for now. It may get reallocated out to similar with our similar conference rooms, but for now we need a placeholder for this year.
So just going back to the housing development grant, can you just explain so people understand that doesn't mean we're not incentivizing housing, it's just not this way anymore. Can you make sure that it doesn't look like we're just zeros now, right? We're still doing it.
That's an old agreement. Hit the button. That's an old agreement that was paid out over a number of years, and we have redesigned our development incentive package, and now, as it was on the previous slide, that let's go back up there. The development incentive grant is the primary source that developers are interested in right now. They seem to like the way that it's broken down, and housing is a focus of that bylaw, but it's not the only focus of that bylaw. And that bylaw is based on the priorities set by council during their strategic planning session, and is amendable. So if council has different priorities at some point, we'll amend that bylaw and incentivize perhaps other types of developments or styles of development. So it's just we've completed our obligations to a developer who did do some good work, and that's a good thing.
Councilor Cornish?
Jeff, was there much effect? I don't know if it's Calais, Washington County, or Maine. Their contract, is it ending this year or next year? Is it ended already? Tipping fees, does that have much effect on us at all? Do you know? I'm not sure.
Has no effect on us per se. That's an RSC situation that they're dealing with within their own budgets. We only pay for the weight that goes across the scale. Where it potentially long-term can have an effect is on what that tipping fee is as they lose a client. It's very possible that their solution might be to increase the tonnage rate for going across scale. But in this year's budget, it hasn't been a concern. Through some hard work by I believe the board and the staff up at the RSC to look after their members in the light of losing a client. So I guess it's a wait and see kind of approach at this point. All right, so we're on here. So wharf maintenance is up. One of the things that we realized there was the installation and removal of the floating docks. The budget there didn't really accommodate the costs associated with that. So there's about $1,500 in and $1,500 when it comes out for a $3,000 increase there. Our events coordinator was good enough, as she knew we were struggling with budget, to cut her Christmas decorations budget down a little bit for us. So it went from 10 to 5 this year. We're hoping that we'll have less occurrences of things like vandalism on the waterfront and stuff, that we won't have to keep going back to that funding over the long term. RSC tourism promotion, that's a requisition number from the RSC. So we don't have much say in that one. But some of these landlord properties that we have, I think we have to be strategic in how we approach those. We've had conversations about different options over the last little while, but for now, we're kind of keeping the status quo and try and keep these buildings operating as best we can with what we've got. If we reach other decisions down the road, whether massive upgrades are needed, there are, again, tools to deal with that, whether it's borrowing or what have you. So, but that's keeping things kind of flowing as it has in the past. Recreation and culture. So we're trying to, again, first section in the administrative side of the outside rec, we've got a nice little decrease there, again, being far more strategic in our advertising. It's been my experience over my almost 20 years in this business that municipalities spend a lot of money on, I'll call it discretionary advertising. And there's things you have to do legally, there's things you have to do politically, and there are things that you don't have to do. And so we're tightening up those budgets so to, if nothing else, force our own hand to really question what we're signing off on. Parks and playgrounds. Let's see, it's horticulturalist supplies are up a little bit there. We've had to do with some self-watering planters for the plaza to try and get some life into our concrete jungle that we have currently as we start building that out. But for the most part, it's an attempt at a status quo budget. Milltown Pool. So as we said, the Milltown Pool is considered to still be operational as a free asset to the community. Unfortunately, free assets aren't free to us to operate. So this is a breakdown of what it costs for us to operate that as a facility. The general, a couple years ago, I put in the budget notes that we were running at about $1,000 a day to operate the Milltown Pool. And it's gone up since then. But just for order of magnitude for councils to understand what we have going on there. And of course, we have a significant capital expenditure forthcoming on that pool as it desperately needs a new liner, which will not be cheap either. So, but no proposal in this budget to cease operations. Just like to make sure that council's aware of what it costs to run it as it runs.
Yep. Sure can. Go ahead, Councilor.
I'm wondering if there could be any way in which perhaps we create opportunities for certain youth who are struggling in community to apply through a process to have free access, but for the general public to look at standard fees and for you to be able to present us with, on average, how many people use that, let's say $1,000 a day, how many kids or families are using that site, and what would the revenue be if it was $2 admission, $5 admission, $1 admission, because I think there are ways that we can still provide access to youth who may not have the funds to attend through somewhat of an almost jump start, like Canadian Tire's jump start program, where essentially they could just apply through the municipality, gain a pass through the municipality for that summer, and then go from there. It really is unheard of across New Brunswick that you pay $0 to enter a pool. And from working up at that pool and working with youth, I also noticed that it can become a bit of a daycare site because there is no admission, and I find that the guards that are working up there find it extremely challenging. They don't have the skills to be parenting children. They're lifeguards trained to act if there's a situation, but there's more complex issues that come with offering a free site. So I know I'm just saying what everyone is thinking. I think, maybe, but I'd love to hear other counselors' perspectives on that.
So I was active when they pulled the plug on the fees. It was some concerned citizens came to the council chamber at the day, and pushed for that reason, because they were concerned that some people weren't getting to use the pool. I argued the facts as someone that used to work there, that no one sat outside that gate. But that also, that's at that time the people were saying that they would raise the funds, but that never ever grew legs. It never got pushed because we didn't push it, and you know what it's like getting volunteers. I mean, in the end of the day, as Jeff alluded to, this isn't a free service. It's just everybody's paying for it. So if we're comfortable with that, everyone pays for the pool to be open, then we just move on. But you're right, it does create a whole other lot of the services. And I know the guy, like I've been up to the pool a lot there this year with one of my kids, or some of my kids, and it's they do control that pretty well, though. You can't just leave a young child there. There's a certain age category that you actually got to be in the water with them. There's a lot of that stuff going on. But either way, in the end of the day, I know we talk about it being free, but it's not free. It's just every taxpayer is paying for it. So again, but should be a fee? I mean, I thought so at the time, but at the time it was not voted on that way. So anyway, Councilor Cornish, you still on the floor?
No, I just didn't agree with Councilor Otis. Oh, sorry. It's on, I guess, anyway. No, I agree with what you're saying. Is I'm not sure either. I agree with the mayor also. It's one of those things that's it's getting covered, but I do believe lots of cases there are babysitting services there that I know that I've had a lot of involvement over the years with lifeguards there, and that's the only part that always bothered me, was little ones maybe slipping in, or people hanging around there for 8 or 10 hours a day. But whether that would cure it or not, I have no idea. And that's it.
Councilor Wright?
Thank you. I know the Milltown Pool does offer rentals. Is there any place where that income might be captured to see if it's actually, if we're actually out the whole 103,440, which if you divide by 365 days of the year, it's a little less ominous. But is there any income coming in from that would offset that number?
There would be a small amount, and Frank's trying to backtrack into the revenue section, but
I'm not sure that we've pulled that out, but we do have pool revenue. I'm just looking here to see what we got. Outside pool, yeah, there is outside pool revenue. It's showing 3,700, which is taxable. So we have some, depending on the age group that we're servicing and the nature of the program. Some of the revenue is taxable and some isn't. But we got 3,700 that was taxable to outside pool, and 5,300 that is not taxable. So that's about $9,000 that we're bringing in. There's some other fees in here, and I'm not really sure. There are other recreation fees, but it's very small, and it's probably related to fields anyway. But about $9,000 is showing it in our budget here.
Councilor Otis?
I think something that's coming to light as a new counselor sitting and looking at this budget is we've spent a lot of years not charging people appropriately for the services that they get, whether it's $0 or minimal dollars. And then what happens is the costs increase over time. And I mean, if we have to put in a new liner and there are other things that need to be done in the town. Our cost keeps increasing, but then we don't have the revenue to offset it. So it actually, to me, even as a social worker, understanding that all kids deserve a fair right to use the pool, we also need to prepare families for the reality that we won't be able to sustain these things forever if we keep operating at kind of a pro bono operation. I'm sure I'm just probably also saying what maybe our CAO feels sometimes, that, you know, when we talk about how we haven't increased something since 2012, that's actually a huge barrier for families, because then we hit them with, you know, a new normal that they're not used to. So I would rather charge $1 for every kid. And if there are a couple hanging around the fence that need to be let in, that's fine too, rather than nothing, because nothing is not the reality of the world we're living in right now.
Just from a past employer that I had, our approach to dealing with the perception that certain sectors of our community couldn't access services was not to make anything free. What we had done is we built a benefits program for families whose income fell below the low-income cutoff of the federal government, and they would demonstrate that through a tax return in confidentiality with the municipality, and they actually would get a membership card, looked identical to anybody else's membership card. It would have a code on it that we knew, our system knew what it was. So there was no stigmatism attached to it. It looked just like everybody else's card. But either it gave a discount or free admission, depending on the criteria that council had set at the time. So I'm just saying there are other ways to deal with some of these social concerns that we know are beneficial to the community. Like health and wellness is beneficial to us as a government in the long run. So, you know, free is not always the answer. There are innovative ways to do things that you can come up with. We could quite easily build a program similar to what we had in my past employer. Here, I don't see that being a problem at all. It'd take a little bit of work and a council policy to get it going. But and the thing I did love about it is that if you had the two membership cards on the table, you wouldn't be able to tell which one was which. You know, and it was a confidential meeting with one of our staff to go over the numbers and confirm that your family was eligible, and away you go. Right? It's so there are things that can be done that would balance the scales if you wanted to.
Councillor Cornish?
I don't know, Kevin, it may be for you, but what is the traffic in there? Is there 100 kids go there a day, 100 adults go a day? Do you have any idea what the population goes in and out?
Yeah, it really does depend on a number of factors. Obviously, the weather is a big one. The hotter it is, it gets crazier in there. Different times of the day. We do have swimming lessons, which is a revenue generator as well. They're usually kind of early in the morning till late morning. And then, yeah, it gets busy between 12 and 4, and it can be on average, 75 swimmers, should we say, depending on what age, depending on the day of the week, and the weather, of course. So there's potential there for sure, and the idea of certainly subsidising would help us in the revenue side.
My follow-up question is, what about like a larger, so if a daycare like the Boys and Girls Club or Boulevard brought a group up there of 20 kids and swam during public swim, did they pay a fee as an organization to bring that many kids, or did they just bring 20 kids and it's absolutely 100% free?
For the outdoor pool, it's free. They can rent it, but they usually, as long as their ratios, the adults or the older kids match the ratios that we have, it's a free pool. Unless they really want to rent it, a private rental, it's a free pool.
So I'm just going to throw this out there, but daycare fees have risen a tremendous amount, and people are paying huge amounts to send their kids to daycare every day, who are then being dropped off at our pool free of charge. So this is something, I mean, it's really something we have to look at here, because every other, whether it's nonprofit or community organization, is, you know, following up with these trends and trying to financially keep up and making fiscal decisions that are in the best interest of their organization. So why would we not do the same? Just throwing that out there.
So we have two pools, one we pay for and one has no roof, which is free. Yeah. That's the way, bottom line? Okay, that's all I want to make sure.
So let's just put this in perspective. Let's talk about something else beside a pool.
Sure.
A large club brings kids to skating. How's that work?
We don't have the same ratios on the skate rink purely from a life-saving perspective. We don't, you know, if somebody falls over on the ice, they're not going to drown, hopefully. So we don't have the same ratios, but if they are a large club, they should have their own ratio from organizer to... if they are coming for a public skate, they're paying the same rates for that. If it's a private rental. If you want a private rental here, you just want exclusivity, then you get that, but you have to pay the rental fee.
Okay, and so so let's say they do the same thing in the pool here. Like a club rents the pool. Is that how that works? And they pay.
That's correct.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, I know, getting back to the skating, that this school will rent the skating every week, right? They bring a large, so they have to pay the actual amount that anybody else would pay. Is that correct? Yeah, okay.
That's correct, yeah.
Just for clarification, other than pools, we have baseball fields, softball fields, things like that. Do we make any revenue off of that, or are they just free to the public? Or do the teams have to pay so much per year for usage?
We only operate one field, and that's the field at the Legion, at the Rotary field. It's the only field we have, and we only have one renter, which is the middle school. And they usually rent the field between start of Labor Day and Halloween, and then of course we get the Ballier family for the ball diamond, but that's one weekend a year. So,
Councillor Cornet or Councillor Rodas?
We look alike, though, don't we?
I'm glad I shaved today.
We all know who's better looking, though.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, I think the easiest solution I'd like to see to this is I would love to see if Jeff could give us some other municipalities that are similar in size and demographic, etc., because we have newly amalgamated here, so our costs have risen, and why would we not follow the same trends as every other municipality who's our size? And it's not personal, it's just business. I mean, we do that with everything else operationally. We look at other communities and what they spend on certain things. So I really think we just should start there. And I think we're doing 100% disservice to people by giving a free admission, because it's absolutely 1,000% not sustainable, and we're going to have to do it sometime. So why not do it now when we've just amalgamated and we can? So if you could just do research, that's something, if everyone agreed with that, I think it would be interesting to see what do other communities in terms of our size charge for admission to a pool.
Sure. When we get to the bottom end of this section of our discussions and we talk about tools for balancing the budget, user fees are definitely one of the ones listed, so we can explore that when we get there for sure. Okay, that was fun. All right, so other outside recreation in our budget. This is where you'll find our events development folks, and a little bit of money for some MDSS promotional items. Some of the things that you've seen, and some of the, I think some of you may even received over the years that have our logos on them. The Christmas promotion advertising, that's was a relic with the the BIA, a partnership that doesn't currently exist. We try to work in conjunction with and parallel to, but there was some business issues around the advertising dollars over a number of years. So we've taken that out. If it comes back together, that money could be found from somewhere else if we needed to. Community events expenses, that's one thing to keep note of. Community events expenses are community events where we do not generate revenue from, or at least we don't break even. You'll see another line later that's called special events. Those are designed, anything that gets coded there is revenue neutral or profit generating. We'll get there. But that is the big one there, is to keep those two straight, because I know I confuse them when I talk to my own staff about it sometimes. They're so easily to, which funds are we going for? Board Arena, basically status quo here, just to keep it going while we explore all the opportunities that are out there right now. So no electricity is down, mainly because we haven't been turning the lights on in that building. Every time we throw the switch over there, it's really expensive because it's still got the old 3-phase power in there. So we try to avoid that at pretty much all costs. So we have been able to successfully do that, bring it down a little bit. So now we enter into the facility that we're sitting in, which is the operations of the Garcelon Civic Center. So you'll have all your team that works in here. Their training is in here. The big change in this particular section really is in wages and payroll, and that's union contract stuff. Physical operations. Again, I commend Kev and Jeremy and the crew for working really hard to get this budget as close to 2023's budget as we really could. We found, one of the things we really found that we were, originally, when we did our original budget, we were overestimating was actually on the electrical side here. Some of the improvements that Jeremy has coordinated have reaped some benefits, which is how we were able to keep the previous year's budget for our electrical, because our actuals were looking really, really good in 2023. So we continue to strive to find those efficiencies throughout the building to get this thing running as efficient as possible. I'm not sure if there's much else. We did really good keeping it status quo there. So this time when we mentioned pool, we actually mean the pool inside this building. So this is the paid pool, if you want to call it that. So again here we've got, again, staff salaries is the big part there, which is lifeguards. It's, we had a shortage of lifeguards in 2023 for most of the year. Kudos to Kev and Aaron and the team for getting out and recruiting and finding very, very hard to find lifeguards. And we finally got I think, full complement right now. I don't think we're taking any more right now, which is a nice problem to have at the moment.
I actually liked your idea when we were talking about the unpaid pool, but I'd like to see you do that same process here for this pool, because maybe there is people that aren't getting to get in and go swimming. I know we do those toonie swims and stuff, which is quite popular, but maybe we can make sure we have a pass for some, just to put that out there. I mean, I think that works both ways, but just wanted to share that. And yeah. Councilor Greenlaw?
So on the salaries and wages in the top line, it's about 120,000 more. If you added more staff, like lifeguards would be, like if you got 10 lifeguards and they're working this many hours, or you got 20 lifeguards, they'd be working less hours, so the wages should be relatively the same, right?
So this is, for the last year, in 2023, we've actually had contracted staff who aren't unionized. We only have 3 unionized staff right now. Prior to this, to this being approved, and they have helped. The contract staff, there is approximately 4 of them. The number of hours, it's an equivalent of 1.25, I think, full-time employees. And so to move these into under the unionised staff, which is really kind of where we're trying to be fair to them, we've budgeted to move those over, which is a higher rate of pay than they were as contracted staff. I think, with the number of programs we have and the number of lifeguards we have, we are like we said, we've got where we want to be. So it's a good place right now, and it's offering the best services and the most services we've had in my time here.
And Mr. Sumner's neglecting the most obvious answer, which is the GCC pool was closed for 4 months in 2023, and it was budgeted to be closed for 4 months. So that budget is artificially low, and now we're going to be fully operational for 12 is the intention. So that would be the part of the discrepancy as well. The wages in 2023 were actually shifted to the Milltown pool, because these lifeguards here weren't needed here. So that cost center actually got shifted, and now we got to shift those costs back out. Okay. Any other questions on pool, the walking track, which is relatively low maintenance, meeting conference areas? Okay. Not much, no way it changes here. So here's the special events section that I was referencing, that this is specifically held for seed money to bring in. It could be a concert, it could be, in the past we've had a Sea Dogs hockey game, but these things come with costs. So what we realized years ago is we didn't have any money set aside to take advantage of opportunities when they landed in our lap. So we've earmarked the money. There's, on the revenue side, there's an exact offset. Actually, there's slightly more. $10,000 more in revenue than we're seeing in expenses here, because the events development coordinator committed that she can make $10,000 on these events in 2024. So it's actually, this one is a slight profit generating item. So, which unfortunately municipal government is few and far between, but we do appreciate Michelle's work on doing that.
Councillor Cornish?
I know that I've been approached by several people, the parking lot outside, and I see the painting and things like that, but I don't see anything up there for any improvements. One thing that came to my attention several times is that at night, particularly now, this time of year, it's very, very hard to even find your car out there in the middle of the lot, and a lot of people are a little bit timid now because of extracurricular activity on the streets at night. That parking lot is very, very poorly lit in the middle, so I just didn't know if it's time to put something in the budget for next year, or how that protocol works.
So that would be new. So that'd be capital. So we can happily add that to the list from when we sit down and do our capital prioritization process. But that's a separate product, separate budget. Okay. All right, that gets us to the bottom of rec facilities. So library. So we are required to, under the Public Libraries Act, to provide the library with a home and maintain that home. So the grant there of $40,917 accomplishes that. I've had conversations with previous librarians that it may do a little bit more than accomplish that. I've also had conversations with other CAOs that it's not an uncommon practice that the municipalities are paying for more than they're legally obligated to under the Act. But it's a slight increase over 2023, but probably not much more than inflationary type things. So we've included their full request there. So that brings us to the end of recreation and culture with the final little bit, which is our contribution to the regional recreation cost share. So we pay $190,000 into the pot of the RSC, and eventually they sent us back about $210,000 of revenue. The CAOs and the executive director for the RC have talked about this program now in post amalgamation, and how it's not really worth the paperwork at this point to be shuffling the money around, and we agree on that. So we're looking at taking another fresh look at how the recreation cost share is working, from a formulaic point of view, from a principal point of view. But again, this is at this point, this is a requisition number. But we do get slightly more in revenue than we pay out. So it's so there again at the end of Kev's section, you can see the list of staff, and kind of just a quick summary of things they do with the Civic Center, green space maintenance, somewhere between 12 and 15 community events a year, plus supporting a bunch of other events that other agencies put on, or people that book our facility here for events of their own. So they're a busy crew. If they're not actively out on the grass delivering a program, they're probably in here planning the next one. So there are our community morale people. So we do appreciate the efforts they all put in. And fiscal services. So here we're back into the banking stuff, which is Frank's bailiwick, but we've got our interest on borrowing, our bank charges, our debt, debentures. You'll see pretty much all this still lives in the St. Stephen column, because it's, as you recall, it's everybody as this marriage got put together of the amalgamation. You kept what you brought into the marriage, and so the debt is to be paid off by St. Stephen. The big one being the capital leasing arrangement in St. David, which is the fire trucks that Frank mentioned earlier, which should be coming off the books at the end of this year. Big thing, again, 2024, the thing that will always really irritate me is you see transfer to general capital reserve, transfer to general operating reserve, transfer to capital fund, all zeros. And that's because this isn't a balanced budget, and we don't put anything in there until after we figured out a way how we're balancing the budget. We were fortunate enough to put $200,000 in 2023 into the general capital reserve, but nothing right now because we have to talk about getting over the hump. So the budget that we just walked through has a shortfall of roughly almost $132,000 that we've got to figure out. So we went from north of $1 million down to 131,000 based on the best things that we could come up with. Now, what can we do? Now, again, not included in the budget. You saw that you guys all got this by email from me the other day. Things that we've talked about over the year that would be nice to haves. Some pool liner for Milltown Pool, that's capital. Something like the service capacity review. Within the budget, there's a general government services special projects line for $50,000. Something from this list could be earmarked there. I don't have anything earmarked for that money at this time. There's some money in the operating reserve that can be used. We're going to have to figure out what if anything you guys want to add in to anything gets added, of course, makes that deficit grow, and then we'll have to budget. We'll have to find a way to balance it. Budget balancing options for the operating fund is pretty simple: tax rate increase, service level decrease, draw on your reserves, or some combination of the previous three. What's it? User fees. Sorry, yes, the user fees should have been on there. That's true. We've talked about user fees, about the GCC, putting 5% on the GCC. But there's Milltown Pool, there's, whatever council sees fit.
So I know that normally we would sit down and we would do our best to balance this budget and hold our tax rate, and I've done that for every year I've been sitting as a council and as mayor. But I also, in the latest, have been criticized for things that we're not doing. Criticizing about better roads, and a lot of the stuff I hear is they pay more. I don't know if that's the measurement of everyone in the municipality. I don't want to raise taxes, but I also can't go on servicing this community if they're not happy with if we're just status quo is not good enough. So, but there's going to be a cost to that. Like, what is that number? Can the citizens handle that number? I know we all talk tough and think we can pay more because we want better, but can we all afford more? I really want council to really think about those things, and you can add your own spin on it as well. But those things are concerning to me. Like, it's an ongoing issue. You know, everyone wants more for less. I know it, but do we need to spend more money or budget more money? And so, you know, here we are. We're getting ready to try and get rid of $132,000 whole tax rate, whether it's from reserves or what have you. But again, I just want to put that idea in everyone's head, and believe me, I don't. No one wants to raise taxes at all. Anyway, I'll let someone else speak to that or speak on their own thoughts. Councilor Rodas?
I think the other opportunity we have, though, is to do some different types of relationship building. So when we talk about, for instance, the Garceland Civic Center having a charge with that and then not the Milltown pool, you're actually creating a disservice to the clients that use that, because you're actually taking the privileged youth of Charlotte County and offering them an opportunity to use the indoor pool, and then segregating kids who can't afford that or families to only use the outdoor pool. So to have a more standardized fee, which I looked up, Woodstock, New Brunswick, same population of us, $2.75 for 1 to 17, adult $4, senior $3.25. You can get a book of 10 for $24, 1 month $20. So a lot of the government programs too that are subsidizing young children, for instance, like the kids that would receive daycare assistance to attend the Boys and Girls Club, often those kids also might be accessing social development services, which for any child in care or any child struggling, they have a social worker who has a budget for that child to engage in recreational activities. So when I'm thinking about the low-income youth, there are other opportunities there for the supports they're already attached to comp that cost. It's not necessarily coming from that specific kid or maybe their family struggling, but to give the kids a pass where they can actually have access to both pools would offer us to build a relationship with that child, and also have our own list of those kids who are accessing that program and be able to perhaps offer them mentorship or opportunity for employment with GCC if we know they're from a low income family and they're struggling and they have a pass. But I think truly to offer zero on certain things, or to offer zero for Milltown but not zero here, it's actually really unfair that those kids that spend the whole summer up there don't have any opportunity from September to March to use this pool in here. So I would just like to look at other communities and what they're charging and go with it, because we have to make informed decisions that are evidence-based, and that's what other communities are doing. And the people of Woodstock are clearly still using the pools, so maybe we'll still have a shot. And the pool is just one example, of course, but there are lots of different examples.
Yeah, I would say I'm talking about much bigger money amount than the pool in my situation. But yes, that it takes all the little things to make up the difference. Is there any other comments, Council? Council Cornish?
Just a question. I know we have got 2 street improvements this year. A lot of money, 1.7 or 2.7 million dollars for each one of them. I know it's a lot of money, but I noticed that there are a few streets in the town we all get challenged on. I'm sure you do more than us because we're in the rural area. But do we resurface roads at all without replacing all the water and sewage, or is that just a waste of time? That keeps bothering me, and I see this just about everywhere. It's like, you go to St. John, it's the same thing. You're trying to avoid potholes most of the time, and here it's bad in some streets and not so bad in others. But that's the same question that we're getting to, is that, like, where's the money going in town. Can't we just pave a street rather than replace the whole thing? So that's just curiosity.
The truth of the matter is, and I've mentioned it. I mentioned it at the public meeting on budget discussions. Unfortunately, when the town of St. Stephen had a capital infrastructure renewal program until the gas tax money came out. And what quickly happened, and not just here, but in municipalities across Canada, is the gas tax money was supposed to be incremental. It was supposed to be on top of what you were doing before. And for about 2 years, you had to prove that to the federal government to get your gas tax, that you still spent what you did the year before. Then the federal government decided they didn't need proof anymore. And when there was no proof anymore, most CAOs in the country said free money and canceled their own internal programs and said our capital program is now the gas tax program. And we do it now. It's exactly what we're doing right now. On the list of things that I wanted I wanted to have discussed was a roads renewal program funded by taxpayer dollars on an annual basis. It might just be a kilometer of mill and pave, right? And according to Dylan, that's, you're looking at in the order of $225,000 to $250,000 a year, or a kilometer to do a mill and pave job. We should be doing that. Council should sit and prioritize the side streets and prioritize and say, here's the list. This is the order we want them done, and this is how much we're willing to pay every year. To get these things done. Yep, you might mill and pave over a road, and eventually, and in 10 years, you may go back and say, okay, it's time to do the underground on that one, but you've had a decade of good roads on top of it, right? And right now, because we rely on gas tax and the bilateral agreement between the feds and the province to fund our capital, their focus is on the environmental stuff. It's on the water sewer separation. Why do we get the money we get? Because we're doing water and sewer separation, and that's a big trigger for them to say, yes, let's give them money because it's an environmental issue. So we're getting things for the roads that we've done, Prince William, Milltown Boulevard, King, Union. And so that's where our attention has been focused, which is good. But if we had still had the incremental program running beside that, your side roads would look a lot better because you would have done a kilometer, 2 kilometers a year. Right? Using current year taxpayer money to just mill it, pave it. Unfortunately, like I said, town of St. Stephen back in the day, when long before me and probably long before the councillors from those that I've been working with for 6 years, made a decision, what I would call a poor policy decision. And things are coming home to roost, right? And we haven't been doing it. We want to do it. We would love to do it. We got to pay for it. And back 20 years ago, a kilometer of mill and pave probably wasn't $225,000, right? Like we inherit decisions of others, and now we're left with, it's the old, when was the best time to plant a tree? 40 years ago. Well, now it's the best time? Today, right? Like at some point we've got to make a decision. I said to the mayor this morning when we were talking, had a little chat before this meeting, and I've presented 19 municipal budgets in my career. And this is the first time I've brought an unbalanced budget to a council because it bothers me to do it. But I could not find a way without making significant policy decisions, which is not my job, to get this budget underneath our current tax rates. Digging into reserves, that's a policy decision that's left for you folks. We can help you, we can make recommendations and whatnot, but it really bothers me. I would love to pave roads, I really would. My motorcycle rides a lot smoother on nicely fresh paved roads. So yeah, but that's the truth is that those incremental programs all died when the federal government took the requirements off of the gas tax money.
Councilor Eastman?
Yeah, I've mentioned this once before or twice before in council as well. Because of this amalgamation, we still got outlining things that are going to affect your budget here. like I had talked about the cemeteries. Protestant cemetery comes in and asks for money. The other cemeteries from the MDSS is going to do the same. So I think it's critical that we take a look and plan for stuff like that as well. Just a comment.
Councillor Wright?
I don't like spending money at all. I shop the sale racks and all that, so I get when people say everything's going up. I get that, and I don't like being quote-unquote the cause of costs going up for people. But in all reality, having no increases for X number of years when everything around us has gone up has led to actually, by default, a decrease of service levels to our citizens because we're having to make do with less. So I think those days are over because the impact of inflation on the municipality is too severe right now. So I think drawing from reserves for me is not an option. I think that an increase, a rate increase, even if it's very, very modest, just to get us in that a mode of understanding that costs go up even for the municipality, and we can't continue to do more with less. I think those days have passed. So I think a modest increase would be something I could, and everybody's definition of modest is different, and I can accept that, but we have to start the conversation, I think, by saying that it's time to start looking at an increase to reflect the reality that it costs more to run this municipality. And I'm not comfortable drawing down our reserves. We need to be building our reserves and investing more in capital expenditures like our roads.
Yeah, just one comment on not raising the tax rates. You know, there was a method behind that. It wasn't.
Absolutely.
We did get more revenue because we were promoting growth, and it was more about increasing the tax base and not the tax rate, which we did. I mean, yes, the amalgamation pumped the brakes on that and hit a reset, I guess, and then we're starting status quo again. But now here we are. So so I just wanted to clarify that. But no, we did hold the line to get the gross. Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to echo what Councillor Wright has said. I mean, I was at a meeting last night, and this is what we had to talk about, raising fees. Wasn't very popular, but really when you look at where we're at. But Jeff, I just wondered like how much you would have to raise it to balance the budget. Like,
how much we would have to raise tax rates right now?
Yes, to balance the budget.
So if you look at the 2024 budget on your sheets in front of you, at the very bottom, you'll see the tax rates required. Someone like Frank probably does a much better job of figuring the percentages out for you than I would on the fly. But there we go. So the very bottom line where it says tax rate on that screen. So the one that I know off the top of my head is the St. Stephen urban one is currently 15636. So it would go to 15692. Frank's running some math over here.
Okay, Councillor Wright. Oh, okay.
Oh, go ahead. I get the
Sorry,
numbers here.
Sorry, wait. No, I'm looking at those numbers, and so this budget that isn't balanced right now is including a little bit of a modest increase, is it not? Because
No, let me try to be clear. The sheet in front of you would balance the budget. Frank's tool, the way that he budgets in our internal stuff, he's because of the old ways of the town. It automatically self-corrects. It says you need X dollars to balance, therefore I'm going to apply the Y tax rate. When we move it to what we call the portal, which is how we submit things to the government, it doesn't automatically do that. You put all your expenses in, it has your assessment loaded in there, and then we have far more flexibility on setting tax rates either between subunits or adjusting the ratio to non-residential than Frank's system was originally designed to do. I've used a bunch of improvements over the last week to give us to start building these new tools in. But the sheet in front of you would balance within, I think last time we tested it was 16 cents or something.
Actually, with these rates, it works out to about less than $100.
Okay. So,
And these rates are a little higher than what the 2023s were, are they not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have the 2022, he just gave me the 1.5636, so that would work out to about 0.4%, so it's less than 1% increase. You have the portal there?
yeah, we have the portal right here. So this is what we call the portal. Brand new from GNB. I think Frank hates it and I love it. It's an interesting dynamic in the office. But but what we can do is we can go under tax rates here. As soon as it loads, there we go. So this column here would be the 2023 tax rates as they currently exist. And then we can change the residential tax rates to any number that we see fit. We can also sneak up here, and this is where we can adjust the ratio between the residential and non-residential properties. Correct. Yep. So just because I've been playing with this, I'll give you an example. So let's say we said 155 on both. So keeping the tax rates, residential tax rates are completely the same, but we're just shifting that multiplier. If I go save, so you're, yep. So we'd have to find another 61 there, whatever it's at, $61,000 there. You know, so, and then, you know, so you could combine that with tax rates. You can combine that with tax rates and user fees. You can, you know, draw some from the reserve, draw 50,000 from out of one of the operating reserves. There's lots of things we can do here that we can with the new portal. So, yep.
Your non-residential heavy industry should be 1.5, I think.
I just changed it to show them what would happen.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's all. So I'm just going to put it back to 2020. Everything will be 2023 rates here in a second. There we go. In hindsight, Councillor Greenlaw, I probably should have done what every other CAO did in the province, and hammered the rurals, because it was the minister's fault, because the minister signed the budget. Unfortunately, in my own mind, my professional ethics got in the way of what would have been good strategy. So, but that's the number we're looking at to balance, without adding any of the stuff that's not in the budget list.
There's actually more of the extras. Okay, hold on. Councilor Greenlaw.
Just one thing we got to consider here is that just raising this tax rate isn't the only thing that's happened. The assessments have gone up, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a whole bunch extra money that's come into this budget because the assessments went up on people's taxes. So if your assessment went up 10% and then your tax rate goes up, now you're getting hit again. So we just got to keep that in mind when we're making these decisions. I don't have any issues with increase in tax rates. You know, I'd like to get into the budget a little more. You know, maybe a little more granularity, but yeah, I think it could be spread across the board a little bit more, and I don't know there's a whole lot there as far as excess fat that we could cut. It looks like it's pretty, you know, pretty yeah. So I don't have any issues with small increases, but I just want to make sure that if somebody's had a $40,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 increase in their property assessment, and then they get dinged with a 4-cent increase in their tax rate, right?
But again, this is balancing this budget is just status quo. That's not going to make the complaints go away. Not that you're ever going to get the complaints go away. Who was next? Councilor Otis.
So when we talked about the rural areas and they were all different tax rates, correct? Is that based on like population in those areas, or?
It's based on how the big black box is GNB.
Because I
It's for the rural areas.
how much of our population actually lives in Ward 2 and how many live in the other wards, and like looking at our own tax rates based on population of those areas, because it is almost split. It's like close enough.
Yep.
What I got everyone on the subunits was proximity and probability of use of services. That's best I could get out of them, but you're right. There was no science behind it I could see.
No, service is a service.
Yeah.
You get your garage picked up, you get you get the fire service, you got the police service, you got the recreation service, it's all there. It's service is a service is a service, and different rates just does not make sense to me, but, Councilor Cornish?
No, I guess I was just trying to figure out, so this is basically a budget, and like you said earlier, I called the guesstimation, $100,000 in the budget we got. That's pretty darn close, one way or the other. The thing that it appears to me, and I could be entirely wrong, is that this is basically the status quo. We're not going to be doing any new road work in town or anything like that. And that's the part, I guess, that concerns me, like, and I go back to Councilor Wright, and I think she's on the mark, is that everything is going up, but everybody wants more. And somehow we've got to balance it, and we're going to take the mayor's going to get the first hit, we're going to get the second or third. But somewheres along the line, those roads and things, and I agree with you 100%, Jeff, someone made a policy in the past that really didn't grow a tree very well, just grew potholes. And I don't know how to do it, but definitely there's got to be an increase in funds somehow if you want to drive down Union Street the whole way without tearing the front of your truck off, and maybe some of those have to be prioritized as the main routes in the town. For instance, right now, Ward 1 has a good route from Grand Falls right into Union Street. But once you hit Union Street and go by the mayor's house and Councilor Rhoda's Cornish house, the road is really, really rough there, and us in the rural area, we pick up those bumps too. And if you look at, and I don't know what happened to Church Street in Milltown, it was fixed up pretty well, but it seemed to be falling apart. I know I've taken one lower hub off already on it, and they're expensive. And then the ones coming into town seem to me to be our first priority, because our rural residents, that's the main routes into town. After that, you'd have the shorter streets. But bottom line is, we're just looking at, what I can heard now is to keep status quo. And if we go above the status quo, money's got to come from somewhere. And I'm not sure that's going to be painful or appreciative.
Not an expert on roads, but I do know the weather changing is wreaking havoc on our roads. Like you just mentioned Church Street, how fast that went. That's not just here. That's in this part of the province. We're really getting hit hard on roads. The freeze thaws are killing us.
More salt won't help that.
Councilor Greenlaw?
One thing I'm thinking of here, with the tax assessments, was it broke down per subunit? Because, for instance, if certain subunits, like, because it was 8.2% or 8.7% across the whole MDSS, right? That was the increase in assessments. But would it be exactly the same for instance, one of the subunits? Because if one of the subunits only saw a 2% or 3% increase in the assessments, then you would expect that their tax rate would have to go up more to compensate. Does that make sense to you, Jeff? What I'm saying?
Yeah. So there, on the screen there is your assessments for 2023 and 2024, but based on the taxing subunits. So you'll see 2023 is the bottom 4 or 5 entries. I mean, things didn't move.
Just mean if one
didn't
see much of an increase,
Yeah.
then you would expect status quo, your tax rate is going to have to go up, because you didn't increase your tax base a lot. If one had 10%, right, like say St. David saw a 10% increase, you'd expect their tax rate to have to come up less to maintain the status quo.
Yeah, so when I guess the "we" is not the right term. When they did the budget last year, and the rural's lowered, some of those, their assessments didn't go up. So they're actually, their bill, what they pay actually went down. And of course, we're not hearing from those people. You don't hear from them, but that happened, right? But yeah, and we don't have control over these assessments. It's what's the hard part. But anyway, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. When I'm looking at the tax rate on the printed sheet in front of us, there is an increase in each one from what was set for last year, which I understand because this budget was designed to balance. But when it was adjusting them automatically, as you talked about, was it applied evenly a percentage? Because when I do the math to subtract the differences between the two, I'm not sure if it was just like whether the rate was 4% or what, that the tax rate had to go up, and was it applied evenly across the districts?
Applied evenly based on their assessment basis. Right? So if you have two that are similar in assessment base but not exact, they're going to change similarly but not exact. And that's part of the, because they're making us divvy up everything. In some ways, the math would be so much easier if we were one municipality with one tax rate to everybody. That's not the system we have, but so it becomes comparing them like that is really difficult, other than just comparing, Western Charlotte in 2023 versus Western Charlotte in 2024, because that factors in any of the costs that have been assigned to them through the subunits, through the budget, and their adjustment in their assessment basis, whatever that was. So they're almost like little mini municipalities because they have their own tax base, their own tax rate, and their own costing in the budget.
That increase that was spread among those four tax rates was adjusted based on those factors. That's what I was wondering, if there was some kind of magic formula behind that. Thank you.
Nothing as simple as just saying, no, 3% across the board. No.
3 years, I had 2 vacant lots, and they doubled the tax. But my property tax for my house did not go up.
Councillor Rodas?
So what you're saying, Jeff, is do we have the powers to have one standard tax rate for the entire municipality, or we don't? We do?
You could get there. It would take time.
I am going to controversially say this, but we are newly amalgamated. We are one community. Why would we not? Because, for many, many years, every single area outside of this community has been accessing these services. I mean, I grew up on the Ledge Road, and we lived outside of town by a couple minutes and never had to pay town taxes. But I mean, I've grown up in this community and accessed every single service in this community my whole life. So I know that will be a controversial one, but it does seem to me that there are, if you look at some of even the property values outside of our municipality, like if you look at the property values inside our municipality versus some of these really huge high-end properties that exist in the rural areas that of course have increased some of the taxes out there. I mean, they're accessing all of our services and kind of doing it free of charge in some ways. I know that's controversial, but we really do access all the same services in this community, and it's a great time to do it, and it would help us an immense amount as a municipality sustain things.
Councillor Wright?
I would have to respectfully disagree, because while I access the services, also when you live in the rural area, you're the last one to get, if you needed something, like I know the town isn't responsible for roads, but we're not going to get plowed, and I know it's not the town responsibility. So, and I'm spending more in gas to travel in from the country, so I'm paying actually more in gas tax than someone who parks their car and only drives it once a week. So, difference of opinion there. What I could get on board with is leveling, having 2 tax rates, one for urban and one for rural. But I don't know as we should try to bite off that chunk in this budget, but but it's something I could definitely be more on board with than having just one single tax rate for everybody. But getting to the options for balancing our budget, I'm, as I mentioned before, I wouldn't be comfortable drawing from reserves. And when I said that the time for holding steady is past, I certainly wasn't pointing any fingers at previous council or mayor. It's just a reality of the society we live in. We did, the town did what it could do, and I mean, we have this beautiful facility, and to have done that without raising taxes, kudos. But it's just a reality of our society and the global shift in economics that I say the time for that is over. So I did want to make that very clear. But going back to our priorities and the things that aren't in this budget that council has said we may want to look at as part of our strategic priorities, Jeff, if you could bring up that list. Bazillion and one slides. So if we want to do any of this stuff in 2024, we have to find a way to make that budget even higher, the revenue even higher. So what in there, I mean, to me, if we're going to keep the Milltown pool open, we have to invest in the pool liner if it's needed. Otherwise, we have an asset that we'll end up soon not being able to use at all. So, I mean, to me, I'm looking at number 7 and going, how could we not? Increased bylaw enforcement might be nice, but can we see what this first year with our new policies and procedures does? Or no, do we have to? And that's something administration and mayor can kind of chime in on. But I'm just looking at it from my perspective, right? It is, but you can give your perspective of boots on the ground. So what is the GIS mapping program? Is that something that's specific to the town? Is that something that is part of what the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission Planning Department kind of helps? So there's lots of questions.
And we have to walk through this and decide, is it a must-have, a nice-to-have, or a don't-need-to-have? Because that'll start getting, we'll start fleshing out what things are, right? So.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we could put, I don't know, green for go and red for no and yellow for maybe or something.
Yep, so if we do that, Your Worship, with your leave, the communications coordinator, that was discussed at strategic planning. Administration's view on it right now is that it could wait, that we've got many people, a number of us that have access to the alertable system. We're pushing out information faster and better than we ever have. And so the CAO's office opinion is that can wait. Let me just go. There we go. Oh. All right. That's up to you guys. You could ask Sean what his opinion is, but so.
Well, honestly, that's going to depend on a lot of these other things. If you want a sidewalk renewal program and road surfacing renewal program and a GIS mapping program, you need somebody to run it. In my opinion.
All right, so maybe we circle back to it.
No, it doesn't have to happen now, but that's right.
I'm just going to be very judgmental here, but cemetery funding, just take that. That's a fee-based thing. We got to pay for our service one way or another. We all end up there.
So, Your Worship, if I may, let me just put this on the table to see. I just see how people react. So, if we say cemetery funding not a priority of this year, does that mean that requests for cemetery funding are not to be submitted to council for consideration on under community grants? Okay, just, it's a consistency thing, right? Either, is it a priority or isn't? And I don't want to have, it's a priority, but it isn't. Like, I don't want to have dueling.
I don't think they're a profitable business. That's what we got to be careful with here. But again, it should be fee-based on supporting what they're doing. You know,
I think we need to be.
we're not discounting people's cars and.
No.
Oh yeah, we should. Sorry, I get kind of out of order here. Okay. Councilor Eastman.
I think this could wait a year as well, under the auspices that we get an organizational board together to cover all this, so that they can provide the feedback to the municipality of what needs to be done in future years.
So, you mean so they kind of form a board for all the cemeteries, and they might be able to share services themselves and then support themselves better? Yeah. Okay. No, I'm with you on that. Thanks. Good point. No, Deputy Mayor, please. Oh, get your hand back.
Okay. No, but
Ladies first.
no, this is just on the cemetery. I know that before we amalgamated, we would support the St. Stephen Cemetery, right? So, and I know it's a big cemetery and a lot of people, I don't know where they get their funding from, but I can compare, like, the St. Stephen Cemetery is not affiliated with the church, is it?
Who pays them?
This is what I don't know, but and I mean, I don't know, like, everybody is different. Because you get the one in Rolling Dam, or you get, like, I know the Catholic cemetery, I mean, the church is struggling with that all the time, but it's not half the size of what the St. Stephen Cemetery is. So
more information.
So we need more information on that before but we could probably put them off for a little while, right?
Mr. Mayor?
Second, Councilor Cornish.
Yeah, turn me off. I agree with Earl, and the only thing is that my concern is that we've got potentially two right now, I guess. Maybe the St. Stephen Cemetery and the Catholic Cemetery. But shortly, whatever shortly is, next year or 4 years, we're going to have Upper Mills, we're going to have Rolling Dam, or whatever, all those. So I agree that it's time to put a committee together to start looking at what we have now and what's going to grow potentially in the future. And I think it was mentioned that maybe some coordination between maintenance of these could be under one roof rather than have each individual one having 2 or 3 people. Maybe we've got, I don't know, but it's definitely got to be covered, because what's happening is people that were buried 50 years ago, 25 years ago, and a lot of them, not that long ago, they took out perpetual care. Unfortunately, a lot of that perpetual care didn't be put into a fund that would draw interest or anything else. It was probably spent in cutting trees at the time, so a lot of these graves are not being maintained by their families or anything else. So I agree with Councilor Eastman that I think it needs to be looked into to see what we can do about it. But for next year, no, cut it for now. No.
Okay, so for that one, I just wrote down no funding, admin support potentially for next year. Neighborhood Works, they had the multi-year $20,000 a year for 3 years request. We paid the first installment out of the Community Grants Fund in 2023.
Councilor.
Something that I've noticed in this community, both whether it's from emails coming in or just on social media, that there seems to be a massive outcry for a warming center of some sort. Now, I actually think Jeff's idea of having more of a firmed up policy on whether or not somebody's request aligns with our strategic plan would allow an opportunity and a loophole for the municipality to support a nonprofit who is achieving part of our strategic plan that might align with affordable housing or something else that fell on the advocacy part. So it's almost we are advocating through their work and through the community grant that they would take on some of that. Because the challenge is right now, if we're just giving $20,000 and it's again general operating funds, then we can't use it to the municipality's advantage to take what the citizens really are asking for that's outside of our scope and use the nonprofits who are currently doing that work in our community by supporting them through that grant. So I would love to have more conversation with them about how we could be more in alignment, I guess, because I can't remember that presentation. I can't remember if it was operational. I don't know if anyone else does, or if it was more specified, and maybe if it was specified at that time to be around transitional housing, if they are looking into other opportunities around other forms of housing for unsheltered individuals, then maybe we could reinitiate that conversation.
When it comes to the unsheltered, the development of a shelter, my conversations with the proponents, and in fact with our MLA this morning, is that the municipal ask when it comes to the shelter is to hook up the water and sewer to the proposed site. I was advised by MLA Baucus that the Minister of DTI is seeking a letter from us confirming that we would be willing to do so if he turned over the land. I can tell you that if we did it with our own forces, it's significantly less than $20,000 to put it in, based on quick engineering estimates and site location. But we could probably put it in for significantly less. To the point where probably it could be an in-kind and we wouldn't have to worry too much about it. But so if we wanted to have something in the budget that was less associated with their original proposal, but it was there to support the proposal for a permanent established shelter scenario, and it's just hooking up the water and sewer lines, that would be a good thing. Because Minister Baucus was asking me today if I could send them a letter saying we would hook up the water and sewer if they got the land. So
building on, I just forget where you were, me or you. At this point here, that I made a mistake earlier. I should have been talking in code, but again, I'm talking in code now because some things are secret and not secret. But this one here, is this this thing we've been talking about for some time, has it got potential now? Like last time we talked about this, it was kind of, no, it was done. Now they're asking if you would put water and sewage in, and you're asking for 20,000 donation. Is this a definite possibility, or are we long shot, or what do you think?
I advised Minister Baucus that I had a meeting tonight, and I would discuss with my council whether or not they would commit to hooking up the water and sewer to the site, which isn't a big job because the main goes right through the property, if the land was turned over, because the Minister of DTI asked her if she could get that letter. That's what I know. So it sounds like there is potential movement at the cabinet table. I don't know the details. She didn't share that with me, but she was asking for the letter that the mayor sent already in support. What else? Oh, the zoning confirmation letter from the RSC that there were no impediments, and the last piece of that three-pronged stool was us saying, if it's the last thing that needs to happen to make this work, that we put the water and sewer in. So if that line was reworked to be that commitment, I think I think that's a better expenditure of taxpayer dollars at this point than the original proposal that came in.
Probably got the materials in stock and we're paying the labor.
Exactly. So let's say this is a yes. All right. Service capacity review, we had presented the RFP for that, and the decision at the time was to get us our much beloved admin support staff for Sean and I. I know that's on the record. But it was still on the list as a maybe item of municipal operations, like administrative operations. It could be the general government's special project this year, if that was a must-have. I mean, I think if we can identify what's the must-haves out of this list and give it back to us, Frank and I can go back to our offices and say, okay, we know what the must-haves are, we know what the would like to haves are, and bring you back tax rates that A, get you your must-haves, B, get you your must-haves and your would like to haves. Like, we can come up with a few scenarios for you. We just need to know exactly what you want in, and then we can figure it out.
I just want to add a little bit. Sorry. Was there not funding opportunities from the provincial government because of the amalgamation? Can we tie that into this, looking at our structure?
No.
All right.
There were indications of support being available. It never materialized as relates to organizational design / HR assistance, because I asked from day one. I wanted to be the first one in. So.
Councillor Wright still? Yep.
I was just going to say that the service capacity review was early on in the year when we did our strategic review, and I think that with the two hires that have been made, that was probably a big part of what was lacking. So from an administrative standpoint, is this something that you feel, I mean, there's reasons why a council might want it as well, I understand that, but from an administrative standpoint, how are you folks feeling at the senior management level for service capacity? Or do you feel that this is like an essential from the administrative side, or could it be pushed a year if we have to kind of incrementally make some changes to our budgets?
I think there's benefits to these types of reviews. Fresh eyes are always good. I would probably suggest that if it was going to be considered, earmarked, if it's a must-have, I would take another look at the RFP that we designed and what the deliverables were. The original one was very broad in its scope, which would make it more expensive for one. But I think council and I should sit down probably in a closed session to discuss the deliverables and make sure that for certain council gets to what they want out of it, but if there's some things that I might benefit from getting out of it as well, that we design those deliverables to match what we want. And if we go from a shotgun to a sniper rifle, your cost comes down, right? Because they know exactly what you're looking to achieve, and it's much easier to bid those projects. So whether it's a must-have or a would like to have, I think it probably isn't. It should be one of those two. That'd be up to you guys which one it is. But
I like Councillor Wright's idea. I know we can have a good debate, but I like the idea of having just an urban and rural tax rate, and I would love to see how we could just use that to start to get us to baseline, and then tick off all the logical ones, like obviously a pool liner and charging something for the pools. And then third step, like you said, just nailing down the ones but I think like having those tax rates just because we're starting and we're newly amalgamated, like instead of getting 2 years down the road and thinking it would be so much easier if we had two tax rates, if we just did it now, then that part is cleaned up and done. And then we can almost build off that and get us to baseline and then build on these items from there. But I do like the idea of two tax rates. And I'm also curious from your standpoint if you feel like that makes your lives easier as well, from an administrative perspective.
As long as the government has us divvied up into different taxing units, it's going to be a not fun process. If we only had two taxing areas, it would be really nice. I don't see that change coming. The minister Elaine at the time was like, "We're not reopening this thing for quite a long time, so get used to it." So, let's not dream about that. But again, as far as the tax rates go, if we can get through this list of what's in, what's out, we can do here's the rates to give you nothing, here's the rates to give you the must-haves, and here's what gives you the must-haves and would like to haves. So if we can just focus on getting us the direction we need from this list, I think Frank and I and the guys here, we can get together and give you like option A, B, C, D, E, and then you guys can have a really fun debate in a week's time and let us know what you want to approve as budget. So, service capacity review.
Would like to have, maybe not a must.
I agree.
Okay.
What is the next one?
Next one. This one's mine.
We get, just want to be sure we're getting everyone all right? Like with that stuff, like make sure you get your voice heard.
Just a point of order, Your Worship. We need a motion to go past 9 o'clock pursuant to your procedural bylaw.
Let's make this list.
But if we get through that, if people are willing to stick out another half hour, we can probably get through this and be done.
Let's do it.
But I literally need a mover, seconder, and a motion to do that.
Or is that gonna, you think you
Set
can?
to 9:30, then we have to break, because that's what you.
What happens if I set it to 10? We can still leave early?
Yeah.
All right, can I have a motion, oh my God, to,
Can we get time and a half?
mover and seconder to
Keep it late.
extend the meeting till 10 o'clock?
Wade said yes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Councilor Greenlaw,
Or one of them.
Councilor Cornish. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
So electronic data records management, that's one of mine. That's what if I was going to earmark anything for the general government special project, that was gonna be it. And that's dealing with all of our paper records that are clogging up the border arena and a giant storage room in the arena and various other places that we've shoved files. It can wait. We can let Celeste start pecking away at the stuff that we can just flat out destroy. Which we have lots of stuff that is legally allowable to be destroyed. We just have to do the paperwork to do it. And let her have a year to do that and then come back and put this one off. So I'm happy to give that one up for now. So we're going to hold that. Okay, pool liner is capital, so it doesn't help or hurt this budget, so we're just going to put that as capital. We'll deal with that one later.
Okay, so I mean, you can't,
Depends how much money you want to spend on Flex Seal tape.
Gorilla Flex seal.
hey, work some,
Being held together by Gorilla tape right now.
yeah.
You have to protect your asset.
So, but that's a capital item, so we'll move it over there. Right? Seemed like earlier you had a thought on this one, Your Worship, so I'll just let you have this one.
Well, I just, it's just one, I mean, I don't want to increase the bylaw officer time if we're not going to have a good outcome from it. But if there's any chance of having a full-time officer and there's going to be a better outcome, sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm only one vote, but everyone, but that's where I'm at. But like I said, I want outcome from it. I don't want.
Now, Your Worship.
Councillor Rodas?
I'd also like to communicate with the community that it's very important that we recognize that if we're going to increase the hours, we use this asset effectively. So sometimes if you're parking in the wrong location every day, all day, if you're calling about the same neighbor every day, all day that's bothering you, that is taking away from the bylaw enforcement's time. So I think we need to acknowledge that when I look at the bylaw reports, a lot of it is, unnecessary. And if the citizens can work with us on that too and just follow the appropriate regulations that are already set out downtown, it will probably increase his capacity as well to increase his service delivery.
Jeff?
Just looking for clarification. So increased bylaw enforcement officer, bylaw enforcement.
Yes.
One guy working full-time hours, one guy working 24/7. Where are we going?
What do we have now?
16 hours a week.
20.
20.
Two guys working 16.
Oh, you want to work?
Two different ones, two different good cop, bad cop.
It'd be hard to fill that position, I bet, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Yeah.
Well, if they're working 20 and you increase it by, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, but if you increase it by 2, each work 20,
Yeah.
I think it's gotta be more, I'm sorry, I haven't got turned on, but I think it's gotta be more than 20, because I think this is by. I am on now, look at that, don't push that. I think that this is an important issue, but I guess I agree with you on that, Jeff, it depends on outcome. But we've gotta try something because the bylaws are not being followed. And there's a lot of complaints about it, so I don't think we can take that one off the list, so that's my.
20 to 40 hours? Is that what we're talking?
You're looking at 1 FTE? Okay, just, I want you to know what my deliverable is, if that's.
So from 20 hours to 40 hours, whether that's 2 at 20 or
Right, that's what I'm calling, that's why I'm putting it as an FTE. Must, like,
What's that? Sidewalk renewal?
must have, or would like to have.
This one we're just talking about right now? Well, it's a must, yes. Well, sorry, by me, it's a must.
No, it is. It's a must.
Yeah. But I mean, a bylaw officer only enforces bylaws, right? So we gotta be careful. There's a lot of things that people think are breaking the law, aren't really breaking the law. They're irritating, but they're not breaking the law. So.
Got a whole bunch of new bylaws.
Yeah, that's right. 100%. Thank you. Thank you, council, for supporting that.
Sidewalk renewal program.
All right. The next two, sidewalk renewal program and road surface renewal programs.
Your worship?
Honestly, it is an absolute must. If you walk downtown, I see a lot of seniors hobbling along the sidewalks, and there's some pretty rough areas. So I think that that would be one that most citizens would love to see. I am only speaking on behalf of the many citizens who talk about how rough our sidewalks are, and people do enjoy to get out in community and walk around. So just a thought.
Mr. Mayor?
No, you.
Hold on. Go ahead, Councilor.
Which one got it?
Sorry.
Yeah, the pretty one. Okay.
No, she was first. You just had a,
Okay, but the surveys that we received, I read every bit of it, and the sidewalks were mentioned over and over and over, okay? So I think it's important.
also said that a lot of other things there too. But.
Well, but they did mention the sidewalk.
Okay, so.
I'm gonna say ditto to the both of them, thank you.
Yeah, we need to start somewhere. It doesn't have to be, $1 million a year, but let's start somewhere.
Okay.
Next.
No. I think it has to.
He wants a number.
So,
How much are we willing wanting him to put in the budget?
This number could be millions and millions, but the point is, I think it's just the same as the streets. We got to pick a plan, pick an area, do so many sidewalks and so many streets. We gotta bite that off and start moving forward. So does that give you a number? It's like so many meters or.
I'm looking for how much taxpayer money do you want dedicated to sidewalks? Once we have that, we can figure out how far we can go.
Councilor Rodas.
I think that what if we, to build on the feedback that we already got, what if we decide on almost like put out a poll of which the roughest sidewalks are, and then if there are 3 common themes, we can just price that out.
But he needs a number for budget.
We can guesstimate up to a certain amount of meters. You can.
Citizens are going to tell us what sidewalks do. We know what wants to be done. There's some that we've been trying to get done for a while.
Okay. Well, maybe do a guesstimate on the 3 key areas that are in the roughest shape. And I have no idea what that would cost. That would be your expertise on how much sidewalks cost, but.
I think Jeff's gotta get back to us on that one.
Yeah, that's vote on it. If we can't give you a number,
Yeah.
Well, how much of a number do you need to be practical of what we can, efficiently do so many, because we only got a certain window to do it,
Then you gotta factor in the cost between concrete and asphalt.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference in cost. So what we need, that's what we need, is we need, what's it gonna cost us for a kilometer of sidewalk on asphalt, on concrete? you know, before you can make a decision and say, okay, now we want to do, 10 kilometers a year based upon those numbers.
That's what I'm saying, just give him a number, because we don't have to, this is for him to do the calculations, and then we're gonna look at it again, say whether we like it or not, right? So,
What number you like?
One.
you guys wanna work back from the answer, but, right? So, just
I have no idea how much it even costs, so I can't throw a number out there.
$100,000 do a lot of sidewalk,
Okay.
probably, wouldn't it?
Not as much as you might think.
No,
I can't remember the exact number that Rory gave us, but it's,
I might be able to find it, actually.
I wanna say it's $100 a meter. Okay, so $100,000 might get you a kilometer.
It took us $7,000 to do the sidewalk in asphalt in the front of the Legion.
How many?
$7,000 for, I would say, 6, 12, 18, 24, maybe 30 feet.
So what are we looking, 200,000? That's a starting point, we can always go down, 250,000?
Yep.
We can say to our citizens, we're investing $250,000 per year, that sounds really good, in our streets and
Well, it's a safety issue.
sidewalks, and it is a safety issue as well, but,
Then we'll convert it all 40%. Like,
yeah.
I'm just looking for a baseline. Because if you only want to get $10,000 for the sidewalk, you're only going to get, well, 30 feet, whatever.
So are we talking road surface and sidewalk in one?
No, road surface is the next one.
Okay,
Just trying to get Frank's going for some numbers for the stuff that we
Okay.
did this summer.
All right, so I'm gonna put 250 in there for now. Just, we'll work with it, and you guys will move it up or down before we do final budget, like we do final approval. That's fine. I'm happy with that. Whoops, I forgot. There we go. Road surface. Now, this one we do have, we know, mill and pave, 220, let's call it 250 for next year, a kilometer.
250,000 a kilometer.
That's mill and pave, not doing anything underground. Because then that's fresh from the engineer, like, those are brand new prices.
Just for reference, the asphalt sidewalk that we put in on Kings Court was $9,300 to have somebody to do that. I don't know exact distance, the Kings Court from the boulevard into the elementary school, along by the border arena. So, we paid the contractor $9,300. Now, the town did the prep work and whatnot and got it ready. But that's asphalt, and that's your cheapest option. You can't do that everywhere. Concrete's a lot more, and then exposed aggregates even more again.
Yeah, I think on that one too, Jeff, I think someplace asphalt is appropriate. Let's call it but downtown, our main street, we've got to make it look good. Almost on some places like cobblestone, But right now, I think the front street definitely needs concrete put on it, and definitely in some places we need asphalt. So I'm in favor of throwing $500,000 down there, because we got a situation on the main street that's really bad.
So just your worship, if I can, so the approach to number 9, number 10 here will be, I will suggest, is if you give us a number, whatever that number is that you think you might be comfortable with, what we'll do is we'll look at the number and say, okay, if they gave us $250,000 for sidewalks, what will we do? And it'd probably be a certain amount in the downtown core doing exposed aggregate, a certain amount in the side streets doing concrete, and a certain amount somewhere else doing asphalt. Like, you probably get this menu of, okay, if you gave us 250, this is what we do with it. If you gave us 100, this is what we would do with it. Because it's gonna, like you said, there's different factors in different areas. So we would do what we normally do, which is, okay, how do we best get the best bang for this money in the community and bring those back to you. So I guess for road surfacing, we do the same thing. If you guys said $500,000, great, we'll work with the engineers, say, I got $500,000 to do mill and pave. What roads are we doing? And we'll look at what's in the worst shape and do that, right?
I think the minimum for road surface would have to be 500,000. If it's 250,000 a kilometer. Wow.
We have a 5-year plan, and hopefully next year will be the first one. The number one is the main street down here for concrete, but anyway, no, good. It stays.
That's outside of the gas tax.
Outside the gas tax. Yep. Yeah, if we got gas tax money, we'll finish off the sewer separation type roads with the full underground and, yeah.
What's the GIS mapping program?
Well, I just wanted to must or like on road.
I think it's a must, to some amount.
Consensus must? Yeah. I just like having clear marching orders. GIS mapping program. I'm going to say that came from us. We took what was in a interesting system in our offices that the former superintendent had. We've exported the data out of it, but we don't currently have the data. Now, that being said, the RSC just got themselves a mapping technician, and I think we can probably hold off on this until we can see if we can just have our data exported into their system and just continue our excellent partnership with the RSC planning folks and use their mapping guy when we need a mapping guy. So I think that's a hold, yeah. So look at me, I'm giving up all mine. But that's okay. I like the stuff that you guys want to do. Border Arena feasibility study, this is something that I had costed out. It was going to be $25,000. And it was just a preliminary study to see what it would take to turn that facility back into a multi-sport indoor recreation facility. So it was be about, so if we did it next year, it was 25, so maybe 20, maybe 30 next year. But it was someone who knows this business and knows, and it was, it's kind of one of those, we've got developers interested, but before we go down that road, maybe we should take one last look about what would service our operations and what it would take to get it back up and running. Because we've looked at it to turn it into a town hall once, and that was not the best use of dollars. But, so. Not for you, Councillor Rodas.
So before we invest dollars into planning a feasibility study on a recreation point of view, I would like to know what the recreation ideas are first and have some more commitment on that. I hear a lot of talk, but is there enough commitment for X, Y, Z? Because you need multiple things going on in there. And before we do the study, I would say. Or we just cut the cord and call it a warehouse. Or they say, like I said, there's been possible sales on that place too. Like it's a contentious topic, 100%. I get it. You know, everyone's got their memories of it and all that thing. But here it sits. It's sitting in its cold storage right now. Do you anticipate that we have the possibility of filling that with different levels of types of recreation?
I can anticipate a world in which, if that was a real multi-sport indoor facility, knowing what I know from my personal life, that organizations like Rugby NB, Soccer NB are dying for indoor space in the winter, and they're using the BMO Dome in Fredericton when they can get access to it, and it's not even heated or anything. And the kids are out there at minus 30 under the little bubble because there's nowhere to play. The facility, the new facility in St. John, is booked solid all the time. You know, I don't see that. I see it as an opportunity, especially if we can get the hotel thing sorted out, for sport tourism to a degree. And well, I know when I was coaching minor football, if I had a place that I could have had the kids inside all winter working on our game, I would have them there, right? So if it's designed properly, which is why I want to get an expert to look at the facility, and he says, don't do it, then we won't, you know, that's a clear thing. But I do think for $30,000 of an architect's time that specializes in this, I think it's worth a look before we completely write off the facility.
Schools as well. I think you're on the path. Because we are lacking a lot of things that we have here. Anything from Axel to go in there with the football.
Lacrosse used to be big.
Lacrosse, yes.
And if I can, Your Worship, too, like, we got the schools are always looking for space, and now I lost what I was going to say there, but yeah, I don't see a world where that's going to be bad money to have that, that one last look from our own perspective before we try and turn that thing over to somebody else.
Just hang on. So the, I get chills when you start talking about all the things you just talked about and the possibilities of that. I love the idea, 100%. But if it's possible and you think it's doable, definitely worth the investment of laying that out. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Cornish.
You sure? You said just what I was going to say. I think we should get the $25,000, get on with it, and find out what we can do with it before we decide to unload it.
Is that the read of the room, everybody?
Let's move on.
All right. I agree.
Policing options.
I do.
I don't have a budget number for that kind of study.
Wouldn't we be better off to wait to see what some other community might have done? Is anybody else doing it, do you know?
They are all over the place.
And then talk to them.
Can we define what we're talking about specifically? Are we talking about actual police officers, or are we talking about, what are we talking, what's everyone's thought?
Changing from the RCMP to the municipal. You do get more control when you have a municipal force. You have more control over where your resources go and how much you want to invest in it. You don't just get what they give you. So a lot of communities are looking at it for those reasons, because of the local oversight you get with it. But like Wade said, there are communities doing it. There was one in BC that just did it successfully, transitioned. They're in the midst of it right now. There are communities in New Brunswick that have done it and done the studies and decided not to proceed. There's another one undergoing the study right now. So there are communities looking at it, and if we wait a year, we might have a little more expertise to draw on. My opinion, only.
So, on policing, and actually we'll back up to the recreation we were just talking about, there is the whole regional concept that we got to take into account when we're talking about putting regional recreation in place, because the regional area may want some type of thing that we're putting in the border arena. Or, same goes with policing. They're talking regional policing as well. So, I also believe that they're going to probably take on that study out there at the Regional Service Commission level. So that's not something we need to pay for out of this budget. Well, we're paying for it anyway, but.
But then we already paid to the RSC.
Yeah, exactly. So those conversations are happening. Yeah.
The last one I have on here is feeding the reserve, some much needed cash.
Yes.
Joyce is ready.
Can you tell me what the reserves are right now as we speak?
Roughly, I had the numbers from Tim right before he went off. And they were end of 2022 because the transactions and stuff for 2023 haven't happened. General capital they're both right around between $500,000 and $600,000 each. And then the operating reserve was right at the legal maximum, which is about $232,000, because that one's limited by how much you can allowed to store away in there. So those aren't exact numbers, but they'd be pretty close.
So just before everyone starts going off here, how much of that do you need secured in your reserves to capture anything that comes aboard you, like extras, emergency funding, or working with a project that comes to us?
So the projects that come to us is generally done by debt, so they don't hit the reserves. The surprises, like sewage lagoons that burn to the ground, they are a combination of insurance and reserves. We do, if we have them. Utility doesn't have any, but one thing I constantly remind these guys when we're doing budgets, we don't budget for emergencies, right? The acts of God are acts of God, and you have to deal with them when they come. Otherwise, you end up with bloated budgets, and I'm not a bloated budgets kind of guy. So the reserves should be managed and planned. And I'm working, we've got the beginnings of good long-term plans and things like that Tim and Frank have started before I ever got on the scene, that I think we need to take up a level in its sophistication. But to have, less than $2 million in reserves for a $12 million operation, when that includes your capital, is not healthy. I've also been told by councils that I have an unhealthy obsession with having reserve money. So, no, it's true. I grew up in an organization that we had $50 million in the bank at any given time. So that's how I cut my teeth. So I've got a somewhat distorted reality when it comes to that sometimes. But if you want to be able to do roads, and if you want to be able to not face tax increases when Sean shows up and says, by the way, I got to buy a new pumper. And yes, when we did the ladder, we did put money, we put $100,000 a year in, right? Every year, we know that, right? But we bought the ladder. Now we're not putting any money back in the reserve. And it's like we were saying before the meeting, right? The day you buy it is the day you plan to replace it. Because, right, it hits your tax rates much smaller. If you know that truck's going to last you 30 years, you just put that 1/30 of that in every year, and then, all of a sudden you have cash at the end of the day, not taxes. So what's the right amount? It's always, it's a gut check thing for councils, is what's the right amount to, because you don't want to tax people to not use their money, but by the same token, that's what reserves are. You're taxing people to not use their money right now. And it's a political thing. It's a very difficult political thing.
What's your total
Somewhere it's right around $1.5 million, give or take.
comfortable number for you?
Well, I said that means bare minimum.
So right now we're below.
When I worked in Alberta, and again, we were a wealthy organization, our council's rule was that at any given point, what should be in investments, we should be able to run the municipality for a year without ever worrying about anything, right? And that's not going to do. I mean, we're now, we're at a minimum of $13 million operation in 2024. I'm not saying that would be a healthy decision for this organization, but that was our rule in Alberta. But that's the way that council approached it. They set a goal and said, and we didn't have it right away, right? They said that these are our goals, and they constantly fed money into them to build those investments up, and then. Then the investments start making money for you, right? And then you can back off your contributions because the money's making its own money.
So you said you were putting $100,000 in reserves toward the purchase of the ladder truck. Could we just continue making that contribution for the next, as a minimum?
I mean,
if we were doing it?
It would be planning a treat today as opposed to.
Yeah, something's better than nothing.
But I do think that council should be looking at us for the long-term planning of the fire trucks because we know these things are coming. Oh, definitely. Right? And you should be asking us that.
And not just fire trucks.
Fire trucks, fire halls, loaders. We can't always turn fire trucks into dump trucks.
Just a rough figure that I use in my head. You don't even have to assign dollars to it. We've got 30 pieces of equipment just off the top of my head, and we try to get 30 years out of them. So that's simple math. You got to buy one a year. Now it might be a half ton this year and a $2 million ladder truck next year, but we got to buy something every year, or we're falling behind. And I don't know of any equipment that we've got budgeted at any point. So at some point, we're going to have to buy 3 or 4 things, right?
Your operating operation budget does cover some of this stuff.
Maintenance. It doesn't buy anything. Just make it. So we're struggling.
Yeah, like I agree. It's not money lost. It's it's going to be put in place and it's there. And if we need to pull it back out and save the day, it's there too. So it's not it's not unwise to do that. That's what they're for. And if cash is king.
250K on sidewalks and 500 on roads. So.
We didn't have 200K, we got a million.
Mm-hmm. We had that conversation last week that we were going to buy it just to balance the budget last week.
Yeah,
so
how many tickets can the town afford to buy?
But we have something to work with now. Okay. Must or like?
Must. Got it.
Okay. I like this process. This is fun.
We're all just tired.
Well, it's just, no, but this is a much healthier process than we've had in the past, right? Because in the past, we were making these policy decisions for councils in the back room of the administrative offices, right? And I told Alan, I said, I can't do it. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to. I'm going to bring an unbalanced budget, which I still don't like, and let you guys do this process and say, we have to have these things. Great. Now I know those decisions potentially have been made, soft has been made. So now we can look at what that means for you and give you some hard numbers. And then you guys get to have a whole nother round of really interesting conversations. Is everybody available next week? Same day, same time kind of thing next week? Because I'll tell you, by Monday, we're going to start getting emails and letters from the government asking us where our budget is. So, because Frank, we might get it in the morning, basically, for No, it's a header, but there's nothing under it, right? All right. Well, thank you for all your work, guys. You did well.
Thank you for all your work.
And we'll.
I need a mover, a second to adjourn. Councilor Rodas, Councilor Greenlaw.
Where are my keys?
All those in favor? Meeting adjourned. Shut us down.